Hey friends, before we dive into tonight's story, did you know that nearly 80% of the people who watch these videos aren't subscribed? If you're enjoying this kind of content, consider hitting the subscribe button. It really helps a lot, and it keeps these long stories going. Also, I'd love to hear from you. What time is it right now where you are, and which city are you listening from tonight? And if these stories help you sleep, feel free to tap the thanks button to support the channel. It truly means a lot. All right, let's get into it. I slid off the on-ramp onto the slick asphalt of Highway 395 just past midnight. The engine's rumble fading under the hum of my cruiser's taillights cutting through the desert dark. I'm Officer Marcus Steele of the California Highway Patrol. Been patrolling these lonely stretches for 5 years now. Most nights are quiet. Occasional stalled rig or flat tire, but not tonight. Not this one. The air was cold, the kind that bites at your cheeks and makes every breath feel like ice on your lungs. I just wrapped the previous call, a broken taillight on a Chevy pickup, and was scoping for a place to pull over and file the report when I caught movement on the shoulder. A sudden flash of red glow reflecting off my passenger side mirror. At first, I chalked it up to a rig with a blown brake light, but as I eased toward the rumble strip, I realized the glow came from a smaller vehicle. A black sedan sat half off the pavement, driver's door yawning wide like a scream in the night. I flicked on my spotlight, killed the cruiser's engine, and wheeled my seat toward the door. In that beam, I saw the car's interior soaked in shadow, its upholstery stained dark. I eased the cruiser up another 10 feet, cut the engine, and grabbed my flashlight in one hand, holster light in the other. My radio crackled. Unit 45, 395 North, mile marker 72. Suspicious vehicle. Occupant fled on foot. Copy? Dispatch replied with the usual. 10-4, backup en route. But I had too many questions and too little light to wait. Step by careful step, I approached the passenger side. The smell hit me first, like rotten meat baking under the sun. I almost gagged, spun my flashlight inside the car. Something on the floorboard caught the beam. Crumpled towels, saturated in a color darker than fresh blood. My hand tightened on the flashlight handle. Somewhere, just outside the beam's reach, I heard a twig snap. My heart kicked up. My pulse drummed between my ears. "Come out," I called, keeping my voice steady though my insides twisted. "This is the CHP. You need help? Show yourself." Static hissed over the radio, but no answer came from the woods. The only reply was the distant roar of an 18-wheeler crossing above on the overpass, its headlights screaming past like ghost trains. I circled to the driver's side before shining my light back into the back seat. The towels were scattered, some on the seat, some wedged under the dash. I knelt, braced one hand on the frame, and carefully lifted a corner of the nearest towel with my gloved fingertip. Underneath was a chunk of flesh, mottled and dangling, the edges crinkled like cello tape. I swallowed hard. A severed hand, 5 fingers clenched tight as if in death's final grip. I snapped a quick photo with my patrol phone, then tossed the towel back, careful not to smear anything. I radioed, voice low but urgent. "Dispatch, Unit 45. I have a possible homicide. I need K9 and homicide investigators at marker 72. No sign of a fleeing subject yet." As I spoke, the air shifted, and I realized the bushes behind me were trembling. I spun, flashlight slicing through the brush. Nothing solid, just branches swaying in the windless night. My breath came out ragged, and I could feel sweat bead at my hairline despite the cold. I took a deep breath. Procedure first. I secured the scene by flicking on the cruiser's emergency lights. Red and blue strobes pulsed across the pinyon pines, painting the scrub in alternating flashes. I stood back and waited, scanning the tree line as my backup sirens wailed in the distance. In that strobe-lit moment, it felt like the world had narrowed to two things: me and the dark woods that swallowed any trace of movement. 10 minutes later, Sergeant Alvarez and 2 deputies arrived, K-9 unit close behind. I briefed them in hushed tones. We fanned out, K-9 officer swinging a leash as the German shepherd nosed the ground. I stayed near the sedan, flashlight dancing over the crumpled towels and ridged seats, each strobe pulse revealing new stains. A deputy opened the rear door. We swept for prints. I watched as he wrapped each towel in an evidence bag, gloves snapping in the quiet. The K-9 team came back with a snort and a bark, but no target. The dog's nose traced the grass, then stalled. I felt a chill. If the scent had died here, that meant the person who ran into the woods either vanished into nothing or circled back somehow. I radioed for aerial support, but at 2 a.m. in this sector, it would be an hour before the statewide helicopter could reach us. As we knelt, mapping out grid coordinates on the sandy shoulder, I couldn't shake the weight of my own breathing. The night was too still, the dark too complete. I thought about the missing occupant. Why run? Were they injured? Panicked? But the calm voice I'd briefly glimpsed in the tree line didn't sound desperate. It sounded purposeful. And no blood trail led from the car to the trees, not a single smear on the gravel. The hand had no match to that voice. Someone had left evidence behind on purpose. Back in the cruiser, I pulled out my spare pen and notepad. My light cast long shadows over the bench seat as I scribbled notes. Black sedan, no plates, hand severed, no occupant, no blood trail, voice in woods. Code 10-36 declared the words felt hollow. How do you document something that makes no sense? I looked up and saw those headlights again, flickering at the edge of sight. No vehicle, no formation, just the way my mind was playing tricks. I leaned back and shut my eyes for a second. In the darkness behind my eyelids, I saw that hands' fingers curling inward, as though squeezing a final, unspoken word. My chest tightened. I flicked the cruiser's map display back on and plotted our position. 50 miles from the nearest sheriff, 90 from the CHP air unit. We were isolated, deep in the Mojave's spine. "Sergeant," I said, standing, "we need to treat this as active. Pin down every angle, every neighbor's camera, every passing rig's dash cam, and keep the K-9 on standby. I want to know if that voice was inside the woods or coming from somewhere else entirely." He nodded. "Understood, Marcus. Let's get moving before sunrise swallows the evidence." As we spread out again, dawn was creeping over the Sierra crest, pale light bleeding into the sky. But even in that gray pre-dawn glow, the highway looked emptier than ever, as if it had expelled every last soul. And beneath the shoulder, wrapped in towels, the hand lay waiting for answers we didn't have yet. By the time the first pale rays of dawn bled over the eastern Sierras, I was already almost 2 hours into the follow-up search. My uniform was stiff with sweat where the patrol vest rubbed against my back, and the gravel shoulder was still frosty under my boots. The emergency strobes on my cruiser had long since shut off, replaced by the amber wigwag as I directed traffic away from mile marker 72. Sergeant Alvarez had set up a temporary command post using the back of his SUV, and the K-9 team hovered nearby, leash in hand, as the sun crept higher. I hunched over my notepad in the passenger seat of the cruiser, jotting down times and witness statements. At 3:47, I'd arrived on scene. 4:12, backup confirmed. 4:35, K-9 deployed. 0502, canvas of passing rigs. 0518 inspected dashcam footage from Big Ridge Overpass. 0543 returned to cruiser. Each entry felt more futile than the last, a sterile catalog of unanswered questions. The morning air was deceptively calm. A faint wind rattled the brittle pinion needles above me, and the desert scrub gave off that dry, dusty scent that sticks to your boots. Across the highway, a gray Freightliner idled while its driver, Deputy Collins, handed me a grainy USB drive. "Got the overpass cam," he said, deliberately casual. "You'll want to see this." Back in the cruiser, I slipped on latex gloves and loaded the clip onto my phone. The footage was dark. Just a single low-angle view of the highway, headlights passing like ghost trains. At 2351, a black sedan swept into frame on the right shoulder, halting abruptly. The camera caught the open door, the kick of gravel as someone jumped out, then a flash of motion toward the tree line before disappearing. That same flash recurred. A shape moving just at the edge of the frame, impossible to make out, like someone sliding between worlds. I tapped the screen. Pause. There, between the sedan and the trees, was nothing but empty air. Yet at exactly 23:52:7, the overpass camera recorded a low, curved shadow crossing the asphalt at an angle that made no sense. It didn't match any passing truck or car. It looked wrong. I furrowed my brows and replayed the segment at half speed. The shadow bent, elongated, as if crawled, then vanished. I called Sergeant Alvarez over. "Take a look at this," I said, handing him the phone. He frowned. "That shadow, it's not consistent with the headlights. Looks like something just moved across the road." He swiped his own gloves on and replayed the clip. When it ended, he looked up. "That's not anything I've ever seen. Let's send it to dispatch. See if the Highway Division has recorded anything similar." I keyed my mic. Unit 45 to dispatch. Playback clip 2352 over Highway 395. Possible unknown subject movement. Request analysis. Static then. Copy that, Unit 45, sending to Tech Unit. Will advise once they report back. I exhaled, rubbing my forehead. The morning light was starting to burn off the cool layer of night, but a deeper chill traced my spine. We'd found the hand. We'd heard the voice. Now we had a shadow moving in ways that defied logic. Across the gravel, Deputy Collins held up a battered walkie-talkie. "I spoke with a local cycle tourer. She saw your cruiser lights before she passed the site last night." He paused. "She says she swears she heard shouting, like someone screaming for help." I leaned forward. "Time?" "About midnight 15. My blood ran cold. At exactly 00:15, I'd been standing at the passenger door, flashlight trained on those towels, about to call for homicide. I never heard anything but the wind. But if someone else heard a human voice, someone out there was active, not just some digital glitch or stray beam in the dark. I asked Collins for her contact information. He scribbled it down. Heather Lawson, touring cyclist from Reno, resting at the Sierra Lodge. I dialed dispatch. "Dispatch, requested we bring Ms. Lawson in for statement. Tag along, Deputy Collins. I want her recollection firsthand." 10-4, Unit 45, came the reply. By 7:30, she arrived, pale, shaken, leg wrapped in a thermal blanket, hands trembling around a paper cup of coffee. Lawson looked like she'd seen a ghost. We sat at the tailgate of Alvarez's SUV, still smelling of diesel and pine. "Ma'am," I began gently, "thank you for coming. Can you tell me exactly what you heard?" She exhaled slowly. "It was weird. I passed the marker, mile 71, and saw your lights flashing. When I got closer, I thought I heard someone yelling. At first I thought it was you calling for someone, but then it sounded deeper, like an older man or maybe a woman. I can't tell. And it wasn't distress exactly, it felt angry. I exchanged a look with Alvarez. Angry? Yes. Like someone demanding someone else. I was maybe 50 feet away, and the sound, it wasn't right. Kit! She gestured at the cruiser. Your engine was off, right? Completely off. No generator, no siren, I confirmed. She nodded. Then I heard it clear as day, then I clapped my hands like, hey, to see if it was just the breeze. It stopped. Then I heard footsteps crunching into the woods. She shuddered. It sounded heavy, like someone in big boots, but there was nobody there when I looked. My jaw tightened. That matched nothing we'd found. No footprints, no blood, no suspects. Yet 3 separate witnesses, me, Lawson, and the mystery captured on video, all heard or saw something manifest then vanish. We got her settled with an officer to drive her back. As she left, I watched her pedal away on her rented bike, frame wobbling under her weight. Once she rounded the bend, the road was empty again, and the desert swallowed her figure. Over the next 2 hours, we combed the scrub. Deputies unrolled crime scene tape, measured distances with laser rangefinders, and photographed every rock and bush. I knelt beside a patch of disturbed dirt 15 feet east of the sedan. The soil was loose in a perfect semicircle, no obvious tracks, but the ground felt recently upended. I snapped shots with my patrol camera. Close-ups of broken twigs, subtle depressions, faint dark stains that might have been blood or oil. At 0912, the K9 team radioed in. Negative. The dog had hit a scent, trailed 50 yards, then balked at an unseen barrier before circling back. The handler said, Rex's hackles went up. He refused to go further. I rubbed my chin. That barrier had to be something more than a fallen tree or a culvert. It had to be. I didn't know. Sheriff's lab techs were en route now, but not until noon. I paced the shoulder, cup of lukewarm coffee in my hand, listening to the world wake up. The rumble of log trucks on the pass, the distant bark of a coyote pack, the rustle of wind-blown shrubs. I realized I hadn't eaten in hours. My stomach growled. I tore open a granola bar, chipped a corner into my mouth, then tossed the wrapper in the grass. As I did, something glinted in the sun along the shoulder, metallic, like a piece of jewelry or a coin. I bent down and picked up a tarnished ring, its surface engraved with a cursive M. The band was old, silver, scuffed. I inspected it. No stone, just the initial. I tucked it into an evidence bag, noting GPS coordinates and time, 9:27. Got something? Alvarez asked, striding up. Ring, I said, holding it out. Initial M looks vintage. His eyes narrowed. Could be personal, could be part of the victim's items, or a red herring. I nodded. But it wasn't there last night, or I would have seen it. It's fresh. We cataloged the ring and moved on. I felt the weight of every moment pressing in. The hand, the torn towels, the shouting voice, the unnatural shadow. Now this ring. Someone, something, had orchestrated every piece, planting evidence and pulling back before we could trace it. By 11 o'clock, the lab truck arrived, white Chevy crew cab with amber lights. The techs hopped out, unloading coolers and gear. I walked them through the scene. Car there, I said, pointing. Towels here, prints under dash, specimens in bag 045. Their cameras clicked as they recorded every angle, every smear. When they were done, I stepped aside. My phone buzzed. Dispatch. Unit 45. Tech Division reports that the overpass camera's metadata was tampered with. Timestamps were shifted by 3 minutes. I felt a hot spike of adrenaline. Copy that. You said tampered? Affirmative. Someone altered the camera clock. It wasn't accidental. I ran my hand through my hair. All right, send me the corrected footage immediately. I turned to Alvarez, voice low. They manipulated the evidence at the source. Somebody knew our procedures, our cameras. This is planned. He gripped my shoulder. We're going to get to the bottom of it. Let's move back to the cruiser and review that corrected footage. In the back seat, I popped the USB into the laptop dock. The screen flickered as the clip loaded. This time, the sedan slid into frame at 23:48, driver's door open. The figure hopped out at 23:49:12, 1 minute earlier than we thought. No anomalous shadow at 23:52:7. Instead, a second figure materialized beside the open door at 23:50:03, stooped, then vanished in the trees. A second figure. My blood ran cold. I replayed that moment, zooming in. There, just behind the sedan's B-pillar, a blur, indistinct but undeniably human. 2 people, 1 abandoned car, 1 victim severed, and both gone without a trace. I exhaled, voice trembling. There were 2 occupants. Alvarez nodded. And nobody else reported a missing person. We're dealing with professionals. Either ruthless or deranged, maybe both. I shut the laptop. Time to widen the net. Check abandoned vehicle reports along our corridor for the past week. See if anything else matches. As I keyed the mic, the cruiser's speakers crackled. I stopped, hand frozen. The static resolved into a voice, faint but unmistakable. Officer Steele, are you there? My heart stopped. And that was my own voice, my exact same tone from last night. Alvarez looked over, eyes wide. Did you hear that? I swallowed, hand shaking. Yeah, I heard it. The radio hissed again, then went silent. I turned back to my mic, voice low. Unit 45 to dispatch. Do you copy? No answer, only static. In that moment, on that lonely stretch of asphalt, I realized we weren't just chasing clues. We were listening to ourselves, echoing through the darkness. And whatever was out there wasn't done talking. The night had barely begun when I climbed back into my cruiser, the cab's interior still carrying the stale scent of adrenaline and pine. The echo of my own voice over the radio. Officer Steele, are you there? Lingered like a bad dream in my mind. I sat for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, knuckles white. The dashboard clock glowed 003. I could almost feel that unseen figure hovering just beyond the beam of my spotlight watching me. I called in to dispatch. Unit 45 to command, I'm going back to the scene. Need to run 1 more sweep alone. Copy that, Unit 45. Backup is handling the perimeter, came the clipped reply. By 00:15, I was back at mile marker 72, headlights carving 2 rigid lines into the darkness. The sedan was gone, towed away hours ago, but the patch of gravel and scrub remained as I'd left it. I killed the engine, cut the spotlights, and leaned forward, pressing my palm against the cold glass. My reflection looked tired, hollow-eyed. I tapped the mic. Going dark, approaching on foot. Stepping out, I felt the cool bite of night air sharpen my senses. My flashlight flicked on. The beam scoured the brush in long arcs. Every snapped twig and hiss of wind set my heart racing. I moved slowly, methodically, north side of the shoulder, then south. I knelt at the spot where I'd found that severed hand, now bagged and gone, and let the beam dance over the ground. The sand was smooth, except for 1 footprint. A single, deep cleat sole print pressed into the gravel, leading toward the tree line. I froze. The imprint was fresh, still moist, and the direction pointed east, away from the highway. I flicked on my holster light, ignited the red beam, and followed. Each step crunched, each breath tasted like metal. In the wavering beam, I saw a patch of darker earth, a scuffed semicircle where soil had been shifted. I crouched and ran gloved fingers along the edge. There, a single copper rivet, like what you'd find on jeans or a denim jacket. I snapped a photo with my phone and slipped the rivet into an evidence bag. I kept going, deeper into the pinyon pines. The brush closed in overhead, branches snagging my patrol cap. My foot caught on a low root. I stumbled, heart in my throat. When I looked up, the world beyond my flashlight was nothing but dense black. I took a steadying breath. "Stay calm," I muttered to myself. Ahead, I heard breathing, slow, measured. My light caught movement. A slender figure perched on a fallen log, head bowed, shoulders shaking. Relief and tension warred in my chest. I raised my voice. "CHP! Show yourself!" The figure snapped upright, and I saw, no face, just shadow under a hood. They turned and bolted further into the woods, feet leaving fresh prints in the soft soil. I swung my light after them, but they moved too fast, weaving between trunks like a phantom. I broke into a run, heart pounding thunder in my ears. Branches whipped my face, the world spun. Then the figure vanished. I skidded to a stop in a small clearing. Moonlight slivered through the canopy, illuminating a rusted gas canister and an overturned duffel bag. The bag's zipper lay half open, frozen in place. I clicked off my beam, crouched, and pried it fully open. Inside, a coil of rope, a pair of worn leather gloves, and a small notebook bound in black leather. I extracted the notebook, flipping it open. The pages were filled with scrawled entries, times, dates, places. November 2nd, 2347, marker 72, patient 0. No plates, severed hand, no body. My blood ran cold. The person had been here before me, documenting every detail. Further down, 11th of March, 003, replayed call, voice confirming presence, and another line scrawled in hurried pen, subject transfixed, will return. Beneath that, a nearly blank page, save for one phrase in jagged handwriting, "They hear you." I felt the hairs on my neck stand up. I snapped the notebook shut, bagged it, and fought the urge to vomit. I turned back toward the highway and saw a pair of headlights flicker between the trunks. My blood froze. They were coming closer, crawling down the old service road that paralleled the highway. I stepped out of the trees and flicked on my emergency lights. The red-blue glow flashed against the trunks, painting the forest in stuttering bursts. The headlights revealed a battered white pickup, its grille caked with dust. The engine idled, no driver visible. I tapped my mic. Unit 45, unknown vehicle 72, North Service Road, one white truck, no plates. Copy? Copy, Unit 45. Dispatch answered. Go ahead. I moved toward the truck, flashlight and holster light sweeping across the cab. The driver's window was rolled down. I leaned in. "This CHP, step out with your hands visible." No response. My light caught the dash. Inside, another notebook lay open, same black binding. Its pages were blank, as if waiting for the next entry. I turned away. That's when the engine revved, tires spitting gravel. The truck lurched forward, heading back the way it came. I dashed after it, shot 3 rounds across the hood in the air. The bullets tore through the canopy overhead but did nothing to stop it. The truck disappeared down the service road as the underbrush swallowed its lights. I pounded the hood, frustration roiling. "Dispatch. Suspect in white pickup fleeing eastbound. I'm in pursuit." "No units available," came the reply. "You want authorization?" "Yes. Code 3. Stand by." I pressed the radio. "Come on." Static, then Unit 45. Authorization granted. Proceed with caution. I accelerated onto the service road, lights off, siren silent. I kept low, followed the narrow track. The trees closed in. At one point, the road dipped into a gully and I lost sight. I killed the headlights, coasted in darkness, listening for the hum of an engine. There, a soft rumble, then nothing. I crept forward at 2 miles per hour until my grill light caught rusted metal. An overturned white pickup, half buried in mud and brush. I killed the engine, stepped out, gun drawn. My boots sank in wet earth. The air reeked of oil and rot. I circled the truck. The windshield was cracked, the hood crumpled. The driver's door hung open. Inside, the black notebook lay on the seat. I shone my light across the pages. The first entry read simply, "You're here." Below, in blood-red ink, someone had scrawled, "Next page." I yanked the notebook free, and my light caught something on the floorboard. A single, blood-spattered glove with the CHP emblem patched into the cuff. My heart seized. It was my own glove, issued to me 5 years ago. A chill rolled through my veins. I had lost that glove months ago during a multi-agency training exercise. Never recovered until now. I jammed the glove into my jacket pocket, thumb hooked on the emblem so it caught the beam. My reflection glimmered in the cracked windshield. Eyes wide, forced breath fogging the glass. I closed the door, backed away, and called for backup. Unit 45 found suspect vehicle abandoned and overturned. Evidence indicates the personal items planted. I need homicide and forensics out here. Code 3, Marker 72, Service Road Branch. As I waited, I opened the notebook once more. The second page, handwritten in the same crimson ink, read, "Tell them to look deeper. Tell them I'm not done." Then blank pages stretched below, waiting. My breath came in ragged bursts. I could feel something brushing at the edge of my consciousness. An uncanny sensation that I was not alone, that I was being watched. The woods around me were silent, but for the distant hum of traffic. The moon peeked through the clouds, a sickle of cold light. I closed the notebook and slipped it into a secure evidence bag. I turned toward the cruiser, drew my radio. "Dispatch, Unit 45. Situation escalating. I need a perimeter, a full lockdown of this sector, and someone check my phone records. I need to know who's been listening to my calls." Dispatch crackled. "Copy that, Unit 45. Perimeter lockdown is in progress. We'll audit your comm logs." I exhaled, shoulders sagging. I glanced back at the overturned pickup, the split pages of the notebook flickering in the backlit gloom. My gut clenched. They weren't just playing with evidence, they were playing with me. I keyed the mic again. "One more thing. Have I pulled any unauthorized access attempts on CHP servers for the past month? I think our unknown friend is more than just a local drifter." As the wind stirred the branches overhead and backup units converged on the service road, I stood alone in the bucket of my own flashlight beam, clutching twisted metal and cryptic messages, wondering how far this twisted game would go, and whether I'd make it out to write the final page. The moment the overturned pickup was loaded onto the flatbed, the forest fell eerily silent. No rustle of pine needles, no distant rumble of traffic, just my own ragged breathing in the gloaming. I stood at the edge of the service road, watching the crime scene tape flutter in the wind, and realized I was alone again. My flashlight beam trembled in my hand. I could still feel that presence, like a cold finger tracing down my spine. "Officer Steele," Deputy Collins called softly, stepping up beside me. His face was drawn. "The forensics team has what they need. They're bagging the glove, the rivet, the ring, and both notebooks. Lab techs will be out in force at dawn." I nodded. voice low. Get command to post extra units along the next 20 miles eastbound. I want tire wipe teams, dash cam canvas, everything. He keyed his mic. I slipped the second black notebook into my jacket, careful not to flick open the pages. As Collins relayed our orders, I scanned the tree line. Shadows danced where no breeze stirred. I told myself it was just tricks of the light. But I'd learned long ago that fear grows wherever you least expect it. By 1:45 a.m., the perimeter was secure. 2 patrols fanned out along the service road. A trooper parked at the nearest ranch entrance, ready to restrict access. I crouched by the cruiser, using the dash light to review my own radio logs on the in-car computer. That's when I saw it. A gap in the transmission at exactly 0003. 24 seconds of dead air, no static, no hiss, just absolute silence. Yet during that time my mic had recorded something. I pulled the audio file and played it through the cruiser's speakers. A low, deliberate voice, my own, whispered, "Find me." The hairs on my arms pricked. I stiffened. Whoever had staged all this knew how to get inside our system, how to break into radio channels, tamper with overpass cameras, even plant my own service glove. And now they were inside my head, speaking through my equipment. I snapped off the playback, heart pounding. I needed fresh air. I slid out of the cruiser and watched as my breath formed clouds in the beam of my flashlight. The forest felt alive, as though the trees themselves were leaning in to listen. I stepped away from the road, deeper into the pines, the notebook heavy against my chest. In the undergrowth, I spotted the trail of footprints again, the single boot cleat print pressed into soft soil. It curved away from the service road and disappeared under a thicket. I knelt, brushing aside a veil of needles to reveal another copper rivet, identical to the one I'd bagged. My pulse thundered. I pressed a fingertip to each rivet, then matched their spacing on my pad. Marker 72, shoulder 002. Service road, gully 0016. Thicket edge 0020. They were timestamps. Someone was mapping my every move, placing markers like breadcrumbs. I stood and followed the boot's arc through the trees. The moon was high now, full, pale, pouring light through the canopy in ghostly ribbons. My radio crackled. Unit 45, Sergeant Alvarez to you. Where are you? North 30 degrees, 50 feet in, I replied, voice tight. Hold position. Homicide is inbound. I clicked off, heart in my throat. I didn't wait for Alvarez. I kept going, drawn by some compulsion I could neither name nor deny. The footprints led to a small clearing ringed by charred stumps and a circle of broken branches. In the center lay an old Forest Service marker, metal plate nailed to oak. Its paint blistered with age. Someone had scrawled on it with red spray paint. The game begins at dawn. My breath caught in my chest. I raised my flashlight. The words glowed like a warning. I traced each letter, felt the sting of meaning. Tomorrow, at sunrise, whatever this was would escalate. I fumbled the notebook out of my jacket and scribbled beneath the warning, "Your move." I heard footsteps behind me, soft, deliberate. I spun, flashing my light across the circle. No one, just the ghostly forest pressing in. I swallowed. My throat was dry. I tapped the notebook shut and turned toward the highway. When I emerged from the trees, my backup was arriving. Sergeants, homicide detectives, K-9 handlers, all converging on the service road. They paused as I strode back into the amber glow of emergency lights, notebook and rivets in hand. Alvarez met me at the tape. "They found blood on the ring," he said quietly. "Lab says it's type O, yours." I looked down at the silver band, its initial M gleaming under the dome light. My glove slipped from my jacket pocket, another fragment of me left in the mud. The ring, my ring, was soaked in my own blood. I pressed my palm to my forehead. My pulse raced. How? He shook his head. I don't know, but whoever did this, they know you. They have your prints, your blood, your voice. They're inside our systems. I exhaled, tension knotting my shoulders. Then tomorrow, at dawn, we stop playing their game. Alvarez placed a steady hand on my shoulder. Rest up tonight. We hit hard at first light. I nodded, but as I climbed back into the cruiser, I felt hollow. The forest outside seemed darker than ever, full of secrets and shifting shapes. I keyed my mic one last time before shutting the door. Dispatch Unit 45. All available units. Stand by for Operation Sunrise. We take the service road corridor from marker 60 to 90. No one in or out. The reply crackled. Copy, Unit 45. We're with you. I sat behind the wheel, the leather cold against my back. My fingers hovered over the notebook and evidence bags. In the mirror, I could see the ring's M glint one last time. Then my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. You can't hide from yourself, Steele. My heart slammed. I stared at the words, my own name, typed into my screen by someone who breathed beside me in that darkness, who had watched me collect the hand, chase the pickup, comb the woods. I thought of the severed hand, the two figures, the notebooks waiting to be filled. I realize now the finality of it. This was never about finding a killer. It was about making me the victim. I slipped the phone into my pocket and shut off the engine. I stepped out into the still night, the forest around me whispering secrets I couldn't decode. Somewhere beyond the pines, dawn was preparing its light, promising answers, but also danger. I stood at the edge of the road, evidence in one hand, pistol in the other, and looked toward the east. The sky was paling. My breaths were steady but deep, gathering every ounce of resolve. I had one final decision to make. Would I follow the path laid out by my tormentor, or would I forge my own? I took a step forward, and then I asked myself, aloud so the empty highway could hear, who's pulling the strings, and what part of me am I about to lose when the sun comes up? I cranked my patrol rig's engine down to idle as the glow of Interstate 85's green mile marker sign slid past my windshield. Edgefield County, MM42. It was 11:23 p.m., the kind of hour when the road feels like stolen territory, empty asphalt ribbons flanked by whispering trees. My partner, Trooper Jenkins, was leaning against the passenger door, his uniform shirt soaked with sweat despite the cool night air. I kept my boots planted on the gravel shoulder, flashlight in one hand, service weapon holstered but ready. Behind us, the cruiser's red and blue takedown lights carved shafts of color into the darkness, bouncing off the cracked pavement and the low brush lining the road. The call had come in as an abandoned vehicle. No plates, hazard lights on, just off the shoulder. No sign of the driver. Standard check, clear the scene, call it in. But something about a lone sedan blinking at me like a dying firefly set my teeth on edge. After the wreck we'd just cleared, a minor single-car rollover with no injuries, I should have been numb to roadside oddities. But the silence here was too perfect, like the world had paused to watch us. Jenkins tapped the mic on his lapel. Dispatch, Trooper 5-2. We're on scene at mile marker 42, I-85 southbound. One unoccupied vehicle, hazard light cycling. No plates, requesting additional units for traffic control. He glanced at me. Should we call a tow or check inside first? I killed the engine's idle rumble. We check inside first, tow can wait. My voice felt too loud in the stillness. I hopped out, gravel crunching under my boots. The night smelled of pine and diesel, truckers rumbling on the bypass up ahead, but out here the only light was our rig and the sedan's own hazard lamps blinking in lonely rhythm. We approached the dark maroon sedan, a mid-2000s model, rear windshield spider-webbed, trunk popped open. No sign of a body or belongings, just the faint scent of burning pine straw scattered across the floor mats, as if someone had tried to torch something inside. I shone my light inside. Empty. I circled to the passenger side, catching movement in the tree line, roughly 30 yards out where the ditch sloped toward an old farm track. "Jenkins, you see that?" I whispered, pointing. He swung his light but found nothing, only the highway's distant hum and the rustle of leaves. He shrugged. "Probably a deer. Let's see if the plates are in the glove box." He ducked in. I stayed low by the trunk. The glove box yielded no plates, only a dusty registration card with the name reversed out of state. I snapped a photo with my body cam for dispatch. By then, headlights were approaching from behind, backup, and a flatbed tow. I radioed our status. Unit 5-2, negative occupant. One set of tracks leading northbound toward the Harper property. Backup on approach. The reply crackled. "Copy that. Be advised, dispatch has no record of a stop or crash there. ETA 2 minutes. Tracks?" Jenkins asked, helmet light flickering as he exited the car. We crouched over shallow footprints in loose dirt, barefoot and oddly small. They led toward a narrow dirt road flanked by pine saplings. Moonlight broke through drifting clouds, illuminating the path in silver bands. We followed the prints as far as the saplings would allow before the ground fell off into shadow. Ahead rose the silhouette of a farmhouse, fading paint and boarded windows spiking up from the ground like a broken tooth. One porch light buzzed, casting a sickly yellow ellipse on warped floorboards. I clicked my light off the beam to avoid glare. Something's not right. Jenkins, normally quick to joke, stayed silent. He covered me as I approached the porch. The front door hung slightly ajar. Hinges groaned like a wounded animal. My heartbeat drummed in my ears. I raised my free hand in the standard stop gesture, then reached for the door handle. It yielded with a reluctant creak. Inside, stale air hit me, stale and sour, like a closed-up house after years of disuse. My beam cut through the gloom. Faded floral wallpaper peeling at the corners, a single armchair tipped over in the parlor, floorboards warped by age and moisture. The radio on my belt buzzed faintly. I tapped it. "Still clear," Jenkins whispered behind me. He moved to clear each corner with methodical sweeps, gun low, flashlight steady. We worked our way to a narrow hallway. The house's interior felt wrong. Doors stood askew, giving glimpses of rooms that seemed to shift location each time I passed. A bathroom door opened onto an empty hallway. When 2 steps back, I'd sworn I was behind the parlor. It was like walking through a funhouse designed by someone who knew all my fears. Then I saw it. On the hallway's far wall, scrawled in what looked like dried mud, the word Camille. My gut clenched. I opened my hood camera's recording light. "Dispatch, we have Camille on the wall." Mud inscription. Proceeding with extreme caution, Jenkins's voice echoed softly. "Camille Harper. She's the one who cut her bracelet monitor loose 2 nights ago. Same county." I could taste copper at the back of my throat, equivalent to the adrenaline rush in my veins. A case we'd both read about, but never thought we'd encounter this way. Footsteps, or what sounded like footsteps, creaked on the floor behind me. I spun, gun drawn, but saw only darkened doorways. "Jenkins?" I hissed. He wasn't behind me, My radio crackled. "Trooper 5-2, backup stuck in traffic, 10-4?" The dispatcher's static voice snapped me back. "Maintain your perimeter. ETA 5 minutes." That gave me a heartbeat to breathe. I backed up the hallway, scanning each door. One was sealed tight. Fresh paint dripped at the seams, plugged shut. I jiggled the knob. Locked. No keyhole. I exchanged a glance with Jenkins as he reappeared at the hallway's start, flashlight bobbing. "We should stick together," he said quietly. Together, we broke through the sealed door. Behind it lay stairs to the attic. Steep, narrow, bathed in a single dangling bulb's weak glow. The attic smelled of old insulation and rot, pine needles littering the floor like confetti after a party long ended. Loose boards creaked under our boots. I called out, "Camille, South Carolina Highway Patrol." Silence. Then a soft guttural hum deep in the rafters. I signaled Jenkins forward. He moved slowly, one foot after the other, hands raised. I dropped to one knee, trained my light on a corner. A form crouched there, rocking back and forth. Jenkins lowered to his knee too, voice calm. "Ma'am, we're here to help. Show yourself." She was a woman in her 40s, clothes ragged, hair caked with dirt. Her eyes were glassy, fixated on nothing. She didn't respond, only rocked, uttering a single syllable. "Me." Jenkins edged closer. I stayed back, scanning the dark rafters for any sign of additional movement. Suddenly, the floorboards behind me groaned. I pivoted. Nothing. Then a whisper behind my ear, "Go." I yanked around. Jenkins had vanished again. My radio died in my hand, silent. The attic door slammed shut with a force that rattled the whole house. My light flickered. Adrenaline spiked so violently my ears rang. I bashed at the door, breathing ragged. Jenkins. But only the hum of the bulb above answered. My fingers found the knob. It swung open under a hard twist. I stumbled out of the attic into a corridor different from the one we entered. Now, 5 doors lined each side, not 2. The air felt colder, heavier, like the house had grown around me, trapping me inside its warped halls. My heart pounded through the walls. I swallowed hard. "Dispatch, code 6, I'm drifting. Structure's unstable. I don't know Jenkins's whereabouts." Static crackled, then her voice. "Trooper 5-2, dispatch. Hang tight. Backup ETA 3 minutes." 3 minutes could save a life, or damn it. Footsteps, soft, deliberate, echoed down the corridor. I followed the sound, beam trembling. It led me toward a door at the end. The nameplate was gone, replaced by deep gouges in the wood. I wiped sweat from my brow and turned the handle. Inside, nothing but blackness. I clicked on my hood cam's red light. The room was empty save for a child's photo pinned to the wall. A smiling little girl with curly hair standing beside a woman. Camille, I realized, with a sick twist. I heard Jenkins' voice behind me, low and broken. "Get me out." He leaned, slumped against the frame, uniform torn, eyes hollow. I grabbed his arm. "We're leaving," I said, voice cracking. He nodded, but his legs gave way. I dragged him back through the corridor. Doors slammed shut on their own, chasing us, trying to trap us. We burst into the foyer near the front door just as headlights flooded the windows. Backup had arrived. I hoisted Jenkins over my shoulder. They rushed in. I called the code. "Officer down, need paramedics." They guided us out, and for the first time since we arrived, I saw that pale figure on the porch. A woman in white, unmoving, head tilted. She watched us leave with empty eyes. I glanced back. She vanished. I sat behind the wheel of my cruiser for what felt like hours after Jenkins was taken inside, parking lights still casting sickly halos on the asphalt. My hands trembled as I reached for the steering wheel. wiping sweat from my brow though the night air was cool. I wasn't ready to go home or anywhere. Instead, I radioed dispatch to file an informal report and requested permission to review our body cam and dash cam footage at the station. Dispatch was terse. Trooper 5-2, clear to return for debrief and evidence upload. ETA 20 minutes. I acknowledged and killed the engine, leaning my head against the headrest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the woman on the porch. Her hollow stare seared into my mind. When I finally pushed myself out of the cruiser, gravel crunched beneath my boots. I crossed the shoulder and tapped on the passenger window where Jenkins had sat moments ago. Empty. No sign of him except the faint echo of his last words. Get me out. I swallowed hard, dialed my partner's badge number, but the line went straight to voicemail. I dropped my shoulder into the door and stepped back, the click of the lock echoing in the silence. I forced a breath and jogged to my driver's side, keys jingling as I unlocked it. At the station, the evidence room was eerily warm, 2 officers on grave duty glancing up as I strode by. I nodded without speaking and headed straight for the monitors. I pressed play on the dash cam, our approach to the Harper house, mile marker 42 flashing by, hazard lights low and pleading. I saw myself and Jenkins methodically moving around the sedan, then my flashlight beam swinging through the pine line. Nothing, until it caught a figure perched like a statue, just at the beam's periphery. My finger tightened on the playback knob and I rewound. The figure was gone. I watched frame by frame. There, one single flicker of white between trees, too human to be a deer, too still to be alive. I switched to the body cam. The orange timestamp glowed. April 19th, 2025, 11:27 p.m. I heard my own voice relay our findings, then static as we entered the house. The mud-scrawled Camille came into view on the peeling wallpaper. My pulse raced as I watched the camera dip toward my boots, then a muffled thud as I spun. In that half-second of darkness, something lunged just off camera. The audio spiked with a guttural whisper that I have never been able to reproduce. I hit pause, heart pounding so loud I thought I'd pass out. Uniform regulations would have me lock away the footage for later review, only with a supervisor present, but I couldn't wait. I grabbed my phone and fired off a text to Lieutenant Harris. Got something you need to see. Body cam and dash cam show. Odd. Need to review ASAP. 5-2. No response. Probably asleep. Probably safe in his bed. I glanced at the clock overhead. 3:14 a.m. My shift technically ended at midnight, but I'd radioed a hold for investigation. Nobody was going to kick me out while Jenkins was in the hospital, and dispatch wondered what haunted that farmhouse. I packed the files into the evidence locker, then sat under the harsh fluorescent lights in the briefing room. I paced, hands clasped behind my back, hearing every squeak of the linoleum floor. My mind replayed the attic, charred pine needles underfoot, that single bulb swinging, the hush broken by Jenkins's broken whisper trembling with fear. I closed my eyes and saw it, the child's photo on the wall, the smiling girl next to Camille, like a witness calling out from beyond. I shook my head. It felt like a fever dream. I poured black coffee from the station's dispenser and cradled the styrofoam cup. Steam curled up, stung my nostrils. One sip, bitter. I rewatched the part where Jenkins vanished, how the hallway stretched beyond logic, doors multiplied, paint-sealed seams. It was impossible. Houses don't shift around you. They don't seal doors with fresh paint. They don't whisper your name in mud. But that house did. At sunrise, I drafted my report. Incident at mile marker 42 I-85 southbound. Abandoned vehicle, no occupant. Footprints leading to Harper property. Entry with unspecified structure instability. Mud inscription, Camille. Officer Jenkins, temporarily unresponsive. Found crouched in attic. Unexplained auditory and visual anomalies on body cam. I left the station just as dawn touched the horizon, painting Pine Rose pink. I drove past mile markers, careful to note each one. My cruiser's miles clicked upward, but I didn't pull off for breakfast or rest. Instead, I took the back road toward Camden Township, where the county archives held property records for the Harper farm. The old courthouse smelled of dust and ledger ink. I flashed my badge to the clerk, explained my business in bare terms. She gave me a sympathetic nod and slid me a worn binders labeled Harper and Camille Harper, 1978 to 2005. I thumbed through age-yellowed deeds. The house had been built in 1922, passed from generation to generation, always a Harper daughter as sole inheritor. I found Camille's birth certificate, July 14, 1980. I found her mother's death certificate. Torn pages hinted at cause, undetermined. A clipping from 2005, Harper farmhouse fire kills 1. The location matched mile marker 42 on I-85. The article said a presumed child was lost. Findings were inconclusive, body never recovered. Investigators cited children playing with matches as likely cause. My blood ran cold. The charred rafters in the attic, the pine needles, the photo of Camille as a child, the mud inscription of her name. It wasn't the fugitive we chased last night, it was something driven by memory and tragedy, something that refused to fade. I closed the binder and felt the courthouse floor tilt. I braced against a research table, heart in my throat. I scribbled fumbled notes. Harper House burned 2005. Child presumed dead. No body recovered. Woman left behind. I snapped the binder shut. My phone buzzed, a missed call from Lieutenant. Harris, 2 voicemails. I played the first. Trooper Jenkins' condition is stable. He's awake but not speaking coherently. You need to debrief with command inside the hour. Second voicemail. 5 to 2. Report to Harris's office upon return. This is urgent. I slipped the binder into my bag and headed for the exit. Rain beginning to patter on the courthouse windows like a warning. I drove back toward Edgefield County. Dusk was approaching again, sun slipping away. Sirens wailed in the distance. A crash or a call could be coming in any moment. But my mind was on that farmhouse, on the burnt timbers, on the girl who never left. I pulled off at exit 9 and turned onto the dirt access road leading to mile 42. My cruiser's headlights pierced the gloom. The Harper house sat forlorn, boarded windows, 1 flickering porch light. My palms itched to grab my flashlight, my service weapon. I killed the engine. I stepped onto gravel, heart hammering like I'd never left the scene. The air smelled of wet earth and old smoke. I raised my flashlight and took a slow step forward. Every instinct screamed to run, but I needed answers. I needed to see it again, to understand what we'd unleashed. The board covering the front door was only half nailed now, as if loosened by something or someone. I reached out, fingertips brushing rough wood. A cold breeze rattled behind me, carrying a single, echoing whisper. Stay. I drew breath, squared my shoulders and pushed the board inward. It groaned against rusted nails, and the darkness beyond opened like a mouth ready to swallow me whole. The board cracked free with a protest of splintering wood, and I stepped into an engulfing void. My flashlight cut a narrow cone through stale air thick with the smell of ash and rot. The porch behind me sighed shut under its own weight. plunging everything beyond the beam into darkness. I held my breath, listening for movement, anything. But only the faint hum of distant traffic reached me, as though the world outside had never existed. Ahead lay a low-ceilinged foyer, its once proud molding hanging in flaking strips. Wallpaper curled away from plaster, exposing webwork cracks like lightning frozen in time. My boots whispered against the floorboards. Each echoed knock of wood on wood fell deafening in the silence. The beam of my flashlight glinted off something on the floor, a small rusted locket half buried in ash. I knelt, brushing debris aside, an engraved initial C, and a faded photograph of a little girl holding her mother's hand. My pulse spiked. This wasn't evidence planted by our fugitive. This was the memory of someone who died here. I slipped the locket into my pocket and rose, scanning the narrow hall. The front door lay open behind me, but something nudged at the back of my mind. Once you cross this threshold, you don't leave the same. My hand hovered over the radio clipped to my belt, but static snapped at me whenever I pressed the talk button. Jenkins's name coiled on my tongue. What condition was he in? But right now I needed to see what fate had sealed into this house. I advanced into the living room. My light revealed a fireplace whose brickwork was blackened, mortar crumbling. Above it, a mantel held tarnished silver candlesticks, half melted, no candles inside. The hearth held a smudge of pine needles and charred cloth threads, as if someone had tried to burn away a secret. Across the room, the couch was shredded, its stuffing trailing like entrails. A child's abandoned doll lay face down, one eye missing, eyelashes singed away. A whisper crawled through the room, so soft I almost missed it. Camille. My heart seized. I trained the beam toward the corner. No one. I cleared my throat. Trooper 5-2 to dispatch, I said, voice low. Static. I tapped again. Trooper 5-2 here, backup? Nothing. I cursed under my breath. No comms, I was on my own. I moved toward the staircase. Steps spiraled up into darkness. Carpet threadbare and stained. Each tread squealed like a trapped creature under my weight. I climbed slowly, fist clenched around the flashlight. Halfway up, I froze. On the wall, scrawled in ash and dust, 4 tally marks, one set of 4 vertical lines, then a slash. 5. Underneath, 2 more tally sets. 11. I counted the sets. 5, then another 5, then 1. 11 days, 11 months, 11 victims. I swallowed hard. At the top, a single hallway stretched left and right, doors on either side. Faded wood doors, some cracked, some sealed. Paint exuding from the seams like oozing scars. To the left, a door hung at a crooked angle. To the right, a pair of doors twins of the one we'd peeled open below. But between them, on the wall, someone had carved a child's name. Emily, third name. My throat burned. I blinked. The names formed a litany. Camille, now Emily. 2 children lost here. I realized I was holding my breath. I forced exhalation, voice tremoring. This was no accident. The hush echoed back. I advanced to the left door. It swung inward when I tested the knob, revealing a nursery. Once brightly painted, now ghostly under my beam, chipped pastel walls, a cradle tipped on its side, dry leaves drifting in from a broken window. A mobile dangled overhead, unbalanced, turning in an unfelt breeze, rattling softly. I swallowed past a lump. On the floor, yellowed pages of a child's diary lay scattered. Handwritten entries in a childish scrawl, punctured with fear. October 3rd. I'm sorry I lost my teddy. Mommy is sad. October 5th. The floor makes noises at night. It says my name. October 7th. I hid under the bed, but the children found me. The final page stopped mid-sentence. A smear of red-brown on the edge, a fingerprint imprint. I snapped a photo and stuffed the pages into an evidence bag, breath coming too fast. I backed out, turning right toward the remaining doors. One door was sealed tight, windowless. The other cracked open a sliver. I eased it wider. Inside, the floor was a mosaic of broken mirror shards, catching my light in glittering shards. In the center, a pastel-painted rocking horse lay overturned, legs broken. I stepped among the glass, careful not to cut my boots. On the far wall, a child's handprint, smeared in something dark, unmistakably dried blood. Beneath it, I could make out letters scratched into wood. "It won't let me leave." My stomach dropped. A sudden rush of air slammed the door behind me, plunging the room into darkness except for my handheld beam. I cursed, sprinted back across the glass. My soles scraped. I stumbled, nearly falling onto the mirror shards. I flung the door open from the inside and jolted back into the hallway. My beam danced across peeling wallpaper as the house sighed behind me. On the far end, another door, one I hadn't noticed before, stood ajar. Pale light seeped through. I crept toward it, each step a drumbeat of tension. When I reached it, I peered inside, a long room, walls lined with children's drawings, crayon sketches of houses, trees, smiling stick figures beneath yellow suns. One drawing, pinned with a rusted nail, showed a little girl and a police car beneath an I-85 sign. The girl, labeled Me, reached out to the cruiser, wheels turning. A scrawl at the bottom read, "He never came." My throat clenched. The drawing's eyes, dark circles, seemed to follow me. I reached out to touch the paper. As my finger brushed it, every crayon line sprang to life in my memory. The autopsy report of Camille, the burnt attic insulation, the hospital bed where Jenkins lay in a cot, bloodied with nightmares. I snapped back, yanking my hand away. The drawing fluttered, though no breeze stirred. I was about to leave when a soft creak sounded behind me. I spun the beam toward the door's open frame. Empty. But on the floor, footsteps were etched into the thick layer of dust. Bare footprints, too small for mine, leading into the room. And now, fresh, a second set beside them, larger, a man's boot print. I followed the pair back into the drawing room. They stopped at the little girl's sketch. My heart hammered. From the shadows, a low hum, a child's lullaby, tinny and warped. My blood ran cold. The notes reverberated through the walls, transmuting the static hush into something alive. I swallowed. "Camille?" I called softly, voice cracking. The lullaby halted mid-note, leaving a ringing silence. Then the door slammed shut behind me. My beam swung wild. I ran to the handle. It wouldn't budge. The wood felt warm to the touch, impossibly so. I slammed my shoulder into it. My radio crackled to life with a faint voice. "Trooper 5-2, you haunt." Static devoured the rest. I staggered away as the humming resumed, this time accompanied by the faint shuffle of little feet. The flashlight illuminated the far corner, and there, crouched, was Jenkins, or someone who looked like him. Torn uniform, glassy eyes, head cocked at an unnatural angle. He stared at me, lips moving soundlessly. My heart froze as the lullaby twisted into a whisper. Stay, play, never leave. The figure of Jenkins raised one hand, beckoning. I dropped to one knee, beam flickering. The floor beneath me groaned, as if the house was bending, reshaping itself to trap me here forever. I lunged at the door again, hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the knob. A scream, child's cry, pierced the air. My ears rang. I slammed my shoulder once more. The door cracked. Light spilled in from the hallway. With one final heave, I burst through and collapsed into the hall, gasping. Behind me, I heard the door slam and latch itself with a wet, final click. I scrambled upright and fled down the corridor, boots pounding, chasing the hallway's exit sign, a flickering bulb marking the stairs. As I descended, a chorus of whispers rose behind me. Dozens of voices, children chirping names I couldn't discern. My breath rasped. At the bottom, the stairs ended at the living room's threshold. I burst through into open space and froze. The front door, which I'd pried open from outside, now stood closed, locked, as though it had never been unlatched. The locket around my neck grew hot against my chest, as if the little girl's presence was pressing into me. I backed away, flashlight sweeping around. On the floor, a new set of footprints, my own, leading to the door, and beyond them, another set, tiny and bare, crossing mine toward the living room window. My radio crackled again. "Trooper Jenkins, Code 3, come in." But it wasn't dispatch. It was the voice of a child, plaintive and distant. "Please, help me." And in the halo of my beam, I could see her. A pale silhouette of a little girl in a tattered dress, standing by the window, face turned away. Her shoulders shook with sobs I could almost hear. I swallowed, knuckles white on the flashlight. Every instinct screamed to run, to reach the safety of my cruiser's lights, but I couldn't turn my back on her. I took a single shaky step forward and spoke, voice barely above a whisper, "I'm here. I'm here, Camille." The girl did not turn. Instead, she lifted one arm, pointing to the front door, pointing at the place I had to pass to get out. Behind me, the living room seemed to stretch, the ceiling arching higher, walls peeling inward. The couch's stuffing pulsed like a beating heart. Shadows gathered in the corners, thick and palpable. I realized then that leaving might not end this, that in these walls and the voices and footprints, something had found a way to cross over. And it was tugging at my soul, begging me to stay. My legs felt like lead as I fumbled the flashlight and evidence bag, the air around me shimmering with a cold that wasn't from outside. Every breath came out in ragged steam, as though the house itself had decided to draw me into its lungs. I pushed off against the foyer's warped floorboards and stumbled into the living room, where the couch's shredded cushions tufted at me like grasping hands. The doll lay face up now, one glass eye glinting in my beam. I knew I shouldn't pick it up, evidence protocol, but something in me ached to cradle it, to soothe whatever hurt had twisted this place into its own nightmare. Instead, I crossed to the fireplace and knelt. The smolder of pine needles still lay in ashen tracks across the hearth. I swept my finger through them and watched gray dust sifting off, like a child's footprints fading into memory. In that moment, I understood. These corridors weren't just corridors. They were veins of loss and longing. Each gust of wind, each whisper, each scrawl of mud telling the same story. We were here. We want you to remember us. A soft whimper drew my attention upward. There, in the archway leading back toward the kitchen, stood the little girl, barefoot, in a dress dusted with ash. Her hair hung in damp tendrils around her face. Her eyes were two dark hollows, impossibly deep. My throat went dry. I knelt slowly, lowering my flashlight so as not to blind her. My name's Carter," I said, voice catching. "I knew your name was Camille. I'm sorry." She didn't move. She simply stared, head cocked like a bird listening for rain. I swallowed and stood, stepping toward her. Each board underfoot moaned. She reached out a tiny hand, palm up, an invitation, an entreaty. In her palm lay a single splinter of wood, charred at one end. I recognized it as a shard from the rocking horse's broken leg. It looked harmless there, cradled like a precious talisman. My radio crackled feebly at my hip. I pressed the button, fingernails rattling. No dispatch, no backup. Just static and that faint echo of a lullaby. I glanced down. The shard pulsed in Camille's palm, glowing a dim orange. She waited. My heart thundered. I felt a surge of sympathy. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her she was safe. But her sorrow radiated like a beacon, pulling at something deep in me. Something that whispered I belonged here with her, forever searching these empty rooms. I stepped forward, crouching until our eyes were level. "You're not alone," I whispered. "I hear you. I see you." She blinked once, only once, but the whisper of her name floated through the room. Camille. The walls shuddered. I stood abruptly, nearly dropping the flashlight. The foyer lights flickered on high overhead, then cut out, plunging me into uneven circles of brightness and shadow. From somewhere behind me, a scraping noise. Jenkins. I whirled, flashlight beam swinging, and saw him leaning limply against the mantel, eyes blank but alive. He held out his hand, as if waiting for me to take it, guiding me back to reality. I tore my gaze from Camille and rushed to him, heart leaping. His skin was ice cold. His uniform smelled faintly of smoke and something metallic, fear, maybe. I wrapped my arm around his shoulders. He sagged forward. "We need to go," I said, voice thick. "This place, it's collapsing." The ceiling above us groaned. A plaster cornice cracked and fell in a dusty arc. I half-carried Jenkins toward the door. As we passed the staircase, Camille's silhouette appeared at the top, rocking gently. Her lullaby wove itself through the rails, dragging my gaze upward. I hesitated. My boots scraped against something on the floor. I looked down. A child's shoe, singed at the toe. I recognized the style from the diary pages. Emily's shoe, not Camille's. My stomach turned. I looked to the staircase. Now, two tiny figures sat on the landing, Camille and Emily, each holding a small broken toy. Their heads turned in unison to watch me. My breath hitched. I hoisted Jenkins again and bolted for the front door. The hallway extended unnaturally long, as though the house had grown in my absence. Floorboards rippled underfoot. Wallpaper peeled away in folds that whispered secrets. Muffled cries, half-spoken names, pleas for release. The porch light glowed through the doorway, our way out. Yet, with every step, it seemed to recede. Behind me, footsteps. Tiny, padding. I dared not look back. The air burned in my lungs as I sprinted across the foyer, Jenkins's weight pulling at me. My hand shook on the doorknob, but it would not turn. I yanked with both hands. Metal whined. I shoved my shoulder into the door. It budged. Wood splintered. I slammed through into the night. I collapsed on the gravel, cradling Jenkins's inert body. Beyond us, the Harper house loomed silent, dark windows like empty eye sockets. The trees whispered, leaves rustling as if mocking my escape. Camille's lullaby drifted out through the open doorway, distant and haunting. I fumbled for my radio. Trooper, 5-2. We're out. We're clear. I need Code 3, EMS, mental health, now. My voice trembled. Through the static, I thought I heard a child's voice. Thank you. Then nothing. I sat there, holding Jenkins, heartbeat echoing in my ears, watching Dawn's pale fingers stretch across the sky. Crawling to my feet, I slammed the cruiser door open and pulled Jenkins inside. As I buckled him in, I noticed in the seat's upholstery a smudge of ash, and tiny footprints leading down toward the passenger door. I hesitated. flashlight raised. The footprints faded into nothing at the threshold. I climbed in, radio in hand, and slammed the door shut. We drove away without speaking. The Harper farmhouse shrank behind us, swallowed by pre-dawn gloom. Sirens wailed as EMS converged on mile 42. Dispatch crackled their usual chorus of questions and code checks, but I only half listened. My mind replayed every moment. The locket, the tally marks, the diary pages, the children's voices. Each image was a knot in my memory, tighter with every heartbeat. At the hospital, Jenkins was taken inside on a stretcher. I could hear him muttering fragmented pleas. "Camille, Emily, save us." I followed into the ER bay, but was stopped by a nurse who took my badge and told me to wait. So I did, in a stiff chair under harsh fluorescence, scanning my reflection in the polished floor. My uniform was torn, smeared with dust and ash. My hands shook too much to light a cigarette. Hours passed. A detective arrived with a digital recorder, asking for a statement. As I began to recount the night, I paused at the memory of the doll's single eye glinting in the dark. My eyelids fluttered, and for a moment I saw that glint in the nurse's ID badge clip as she passed. But when I blinked again, it was gone. They asked if I was all right. I nodded, voice brittle. They didn't press. They sent me home on paid leave pending a thorough investigation. At my front door, I lingered, uniform jacket heavy on my shoulders. I reached into my pocket for the locket, but it wasn't there. My heart thundered. I patted both pockets. Empty. I had left it somewhere? Back at the farmhouse? No, I was sure I'd slipped it inside my uniform before climbing the tow rig. A hush settled in the street. My headlights dimmed as I disconnected the dash cord. I opened my car door to retrieve my phone, battery dead, and the streetlights flickered off one by one. I stood in darkness, listening. Somewhere behind me, a child's laughter, soft and distant, pure and innocent, then warped as though played at the wrong speed. I fumbled for my flashlight in the center console. It wasn't there. My heart sank. I checked the passenger seat. Nothing. I opened the glove box. Only old receipts and my sunglasses. The locket was gone. The only thing in its place was a single black and white photo. A little girl with curly hair, smiling up at the camera. No writing on the back. I turned it over. The girl held my own dog tags. My last name printed on the edge of the photo. Carter. My breath caught. I stared at that smiling child. Her eyes were too familiar. My throat tightened. A whisper behind me. Stay. With us. I spun. Empty lot. Overgrown grass. The farmhouse nowhere in sight. I looked down at my hands. Clean. Steady. No locket. No photo. The photo fluttered free from my fingers and drifted into the dark. I bent to retrieve it, but it was gone. A chilled breeze brushed my neck. I heard distant sirens, my name on a dispatcher's lips, the soft buzz of my phone finally coming to life in my pocket. But I couldn't move. Something anchored me to that spot. I whispered her name, Camille, and the night answered with silence, heavy and unbroken, broken only by the faintest echo of distant, childlike laughter fading into the void. What if I never truly left that house? What if it brought me home instead? My legs gave way under me, and I collapsed onto the asphalt, heart pounding as dawn's pale light began to wash the horizon. The whisper of that distant, warped child's laughter echoed in my ears, like drops of ice in my bloodstream. I fumbled at my belt for the handheld radio. Static hissed back at me. No dispatch, no backup. Only that faint lullaby threading through the static, drawing me back. After what felt like minutes, I couldn't tell, I found my flashlight and clicked it on. The beam wavered over the gravel lot where I'd left my cruiser. Its lights were off, engine cold. I stumbled toward it, every step dragging me further from the farmhouse and deeper into my own dread. I slid into the driver's seat, doors locking behind me with a hollow click. My reflection in the cracked rearview showed eyes rimmed red and wild. I started the engine. The dash panel glowed orange and then dimmed, as if unwilling to light for me. I drove in silence, tires whispering on the 2-lane back road toward Edgefield Station, mind replaying every moment of the night. The locket was gone. The photo was gone. So many fragments dissolved into nothing, leaving only questions behind. I tried to call Jenkins, but his phone went to voicemail. The lieutenant's messages nagged on my mind. He needed that debrief, needed my report, but I couldn't bring myself to speak. Words felt hollow. My cruiser pulled into the station lot at 5:47 a.m. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I climbed out. I shook the steering wheel clear of dust and stepped toward the evidence locker. Inside, the diary pages I'd bagged lay under a clear plastic folder. I traced my finger over Emily's final entry, unfinished, smeared in rust brown. I closed my eyes and heard the attic's insulation crackle under my weight. I snapped the folder shut. Lieutenant Harris met me in the hallway. His face was drawn, fatigue etched deep in his eyes. I nodded at the folder. He led me to the briefing room, where Detective Monroe waited, recorder in hand. I sat and exhaled, scrubbed my hand over my face. "It happened," I said. He pressed record. I began stumbling through the timeline. Crash, clear up, abandoned sedan, footprints, Harper House, attic, Jenkins missing, and found the tally marks, the toy horse, the whispers, the children's drawings, the final chase out the front door. Detective Monroe's pen scratched over pages. Harris leaned back, arms crossed. "You nearly didn't get out," he said. "Officer safety, Carter. You should have waited for backup." His words felt hollow, not helpful. I swallowed. "Backup never reached me before the house reached us," I said. "Something in there breaks your reality. It feeds on you." Harris frowned. "This is a property with a fire history, a missing child case, out of our jurisdiction. We call the coroner, the fire marshal, FBI maybe, but ghosts," he shook his head. "Treat it as structural hazards, traumatic stress. You okay to work, or you need stress leave?" I stood, buttoning my coat. "I need to see Jenkins." That was true. If he could speak, maybe he'd explain. Maybe together we could piece this. If I stayed here any longer, every rattle in the walls would chase me to my grave. I drove to County General Hospital on Rogers Road. The morning sun glinted harshly off its windows. Inside, walkway lights hummed as I approached Jenkins's room. I knocked, and the curtain drew back. He sat on the bed, 4 lines in his arm, his uniform jacket folded neatly on the chair. His eyes were distant. He stared at the wall, fluttering images behind his lids. "Jenkins," I said. He blinked and turned to me. His lips moved soundlessly for a moment. Then he whispered, "Carter, help me." I pulled up a chair. "Tell me what you remember." He closed his eyes, took a shaky breath. "She wanted us to stay, play, never leave." His voice trailed off. He shook his head, tears leaking. "I saw them. All of them, bones in the attic. Children's faces burned into the insulation, the tally marks, counting days, counting us." He pressed his palms to his temples, eyes screwed shut. A nurse appeared, touched his shoulder, murmured something, but I shooed her away. I needed his words. Jenkins opened his eyes and met mine. "It's not over," he said. "They're here." His hand jerked toward the window where sunlight glared unbroken. I glanced around. Empty corridor. "Here?" He nodded. tears streaking soot-colored dust on his cheeks. They follow, in my dreams, in your headlights. My stomach churned. He wasn't crazy, at least not entirely. Whatever we encountered had burrowed inside us. I helped him lie back. I stood by the door, heart drumming. When the nurse returned with coffee, I stepped out. The hospital lobby was empty, chairs lined up like soldiers at attention. I poured coffee and heard the day shifts chatter. Nothing about haunted houses, just staff gossip and morning rounds. That normalcy punched a hole in my dread. If only life could be that simple. I left Jenkins in stable hands and drove home. The ride was quiet, radio tuned to static. The sun was climbing by the time I pulled into my driveway. My house, a modest ranch with white siding, looked ordinary, far more ordinary than the Harper farmhouse. I flicked off the engine and sat, hands on the wheel, staring at the front door. My reflection showed a man broken open, shards of fear wedged where calm had been. I shook my head and climbed out. My uniform coat flapped in the breeze. I dug in my pocket for my apartment key but felt nothing. No locket, no diary pages, no charred wood shard. I patted both pockets again. Empty. I sighed, reached into the glove box. A half-drunk bottle of water, sunglasses, a pack of gum. No evidence, no relics of the night's horrors. Only the cold snap of reality. This world didn't keep tokens of terror easily. I locked the door behind me and flicked on the porch light. It sputtered, then burned steady. I let myself in. The interior was neat. My cheap couch, battered coffee table, stack of case files on the desk. I dropped my keys on the table and peered around. Everything was normal. Too normal. No signs of intrusion, no ash on the floor, no tiny footprints trailing across the hardwood. I sank onto the couch. My phone buzzed. 2 missed calls from dispatch, 1 voicemail. I pressed play. Carter, we need your statement. Jenkins is unable. Please come in when you can. Then a second. Trooper Carter, urgent. I gulped. They were already spinning the narrative. Officer Carter influenced by structural hazards, acute stress reaction. I closed my eyes and tried to summon my calm. A mental checklist. Shower, uniform wash, statement, get lunch. But my mind churned. I pictured the farmhouse, walls breathing, door slamming, children's whispers, those tally marks carved into my soul. Could I leave it behind? Could I be normal again? The phone buzzed again. A text message, unknown number. You took what belongs to us. My blood ran cold. I stared at the screen. The message blinked, then vanished. I opened the messaging app. No new messages. The cursor blinked in an empty field. I set the phone down, breathing shallow. A soft thump came from my bedroom. My pulse jumped. I crept across the living room, flashlight in hand. The beam sliced through dim lamp glow. The bedroom door was ajar. I nudged it with my foot. It creaked open to reveal my dress shirt hanging in the closet, sleeves swaying, though no breeze stirred. On the floor lay the photo I'd found in my car, the little girl holding dog tags, smiling. My dog tags, my name imprinted on them. It wasn't there when I left, it was here now. I knelt and picked it up, the girl's eyes, her smile. I stared at my name on the border. Carter. My breath caught. Why was her image here? I pressed my fingertips to her drawn face, ice cold. I looked around, no locket, no diary. Only the photo and the darkness pressing in from the hallway. Behind me, the closet door creaked. I spun. The darkness inside looked empty, until a small face appeared between the coats, Emily's wide, hollow eyes. I stumbled back, heart hammering. Go. Play, a voice whispered, his and hers combined, as though Jenkins and a child spoke as one. I backed out of the room, photo clutched in my hand. The hallway lights flickered, then died, leaving me illuminated only by the flashlight's cone. I hurried back to the living room. Every step echoed. On the coffee table, the doll from the farmhouse sat propped against the remote control, one glass eye reflecting my terrified face. I dropped the photo and radioed dispatch. Trooper Carter to dispatch. Domestic disturbance? Number I need help at my location. Code 3. Static answered. I tried again. Dispatch. Respond to 220 Oakwood Drive. Officer down. Psychological distress. The radio crackled once. Carter, we know. Then silence. The doll's head turned toward me. Its one eye glinted. I dropped the flashlight. The doll's plastic arm twitched. My phone rang. No number. I answered on instinct. Carter. A child's whisper, layered with Jenkins's broken tone. Stay. Forever. The line went dead. I backed into the corner, heart racing so loud I could hear each beat. Sirens wailed in the distance. Probable response from my call. I closed my eyes. When I opened them, the doll sat motionless. The hallway silent. The lights flickered back on. The photo lay face down on the floor, curled at the edges. I stared at it, then at the front door, where morning sun streamed through the window beside it. If I left now, I could escape. I could file my statement, get therapy, maybe transfer units. I slammed my fist into my palm. No, I said to myself, this stops. I grabbed jacket and keys, yanked open the door, and froze. Footprints in ash dust trailed from the threshold to my cruiser, parked on the street. Small, bare prints, and beside them, a larger boot print with a crack in the sole that matched my right boot. I swallowed. The footprints ended at the curb. Beyond them, the street curved away. The morning breeze whispered through the oaks like a child's sigh. I stepped outside. The footprints faded under my boots. I looked down. My right boot had no crack, sole intact. I drew in breath. Something marked my boot last night when I fled. A single leaf fluttered down, landing at my feet. On its surface, scrawled in mud, "Come back." My blood ran cold. I backed away, keys rattling, radio still in hand. The door swung shut on its own behind me, latch clicking home. I glanced back at my home, my sanctuary, now a vessel for the Harper house's sorrow. And I realized I had never really left that house. It had followed me home. I stood on the porch, wind stirring my uniform coat, sirens growing closer down the street. I clutched the doll's missing eye in my pocket, the photo in my hand, and stared at the horizon turning gold. In that moment, I asked myself, was I ever truly free, or had I become just another echo in the Harper house's long, unending tale? I parked under that sputtering amber glow of the lone highway lamp and cut the engine. Silence slammed into me harder than the cold wind whipping down State Route 87. My breath came out in short, visible puffs as I checked my watch. 00:17. November nights in South Carolina can sneak up on you with a bone-deep chill, and this one was no exception. I stepped onto gravel, the crunch echoing far too loud in the stillness, and flipped on my flashlight, its beam carving a tunnel of light through the black. Dispatch had called it a routine welfare check, screaming heard at the old Collier farmhouse off the mile marker. Routine. I forced the word down like bitter medicine. The radio at my shoulder crackled once, then went dead. Static. No answer when I keyed the mic. Just the hiss of white noise fading into the night. I toggled the switch, tried again, nothing. My pulse quickened. Out here, a dead radio meant you were on your own. I swallowed, fought the familiar knot of anxiety that tightened in my gut every time I found myself cut off. I wasn't far from backup quarters, but backup still had to drive through miles of empty road before they could pull up behind me. I followed the gravel drive toward the farmhouse, trees closing in on either side like sentinels. The air smelled of damp pine and decay, wet leaves rotting underfoot. Up ahead, the rickety porch sagged under the weight of years, its boards cracked and splintered. A single figure rocked on the top step, an older man in a threadbare jacket, his head bowed and his shoulders shaking. As I drew closer, I saw he was crying, low, desperate sobs that ripped through the quiet. "Sir," I said, voice firm but calm, "I'm Corporal Jackson with the South Carolina Highway Patrol. Can you tell me what's happening here?" He lifted his head slowly. Pale face, eyes haunted. He mumbled about voices, repeating, "She's here. She's calling." His words slurred together, nearly intelligible. I knelt beside him, hand resting lightly on the butt of my holstered pistol. Not to scare him, but because instincts die hard. "You said you heard screamin'?" He nodded, tears tracking dark lines down his cheeks. "In there, in the house." He pointed with a trembling finger at the dark entrance. I signaled my partner on Channel 3, but the only response was static. I drew a deep breath, lifted my flashlight, and pushed the front door open. It groaned on rusty hinges, a sound like a wounded animal. Inside, the vomit-sweet stench of rot hit me full force. I blinked, fought the urge to gag, and forced my grip on the flashlight steady. The beam swept across overturned chairs, scattered newspapers yellowed with age, and a layer of dust so thick it looked like a pale carpet. "Anyone here?" I called, voice echoing through the open floor plan. Silence answered. My eyes darted to the kitchen to my right. Dishes piled high in the sink, mold creeping along the rim of an abandoned mug, a cluster of empty pill bottles spilled on the counter like little white tombstones. A half-empty bottle of Jack Daniels lay tipped over, label stained with something dark. I jotted a mental note. This wasn't the first wrecked home I'd seen, but it felt different, more deliberate. I edged down the narrow hallway, every footstep loud as thunder. The flicker of my light caught a faded family photograph lying face down, two smiling parents holding a toddler. I paused, reverent for a moment, then flipped it over. The faces were scratched out, gouged by some careless hand. A lump rose in my throat. Even hardened criminals had lines they wouldn't cross. Whoever did this had no conscience. Upstairs, the air turned brittle. The beam revealed a series of doors. Bedroom, guest room, a locked closet. I eased open the master bedroom door. The sight froze me. On the edge of the bed lay two bodies, coated in ash-gray skin. Their features were hollowed, eyes gaping. Flies buzzed overhead in lazy loops. I swallowed hard, forcing myself closer. One was a woman, long hair matted, mouth slack. Beside her, a smaller form, an infant, curled tight, as if asleep. But something was off. A soft creak behind me made my heart jackhammer. I spun, light whipping to the doorway, nothing. Then a faint sound, like a child's cry, barely audible, but unmistakable. My flashlight flickered twice. I backed away, adrenaline flooding my veins. In my peripheral vision, the baby on the bed shifted, arm lifting just enough for me to see a tiny fist unclench. I blinked. It should have been still, dead, but that hand moved. Blood pounded in my ears. I fumbled for my radio, voice shaking when I keyed the mic. "I need backup, suspected homicide scene, multiple victims, infant." The transmission garbled into static. I slammed the mic against my palm in frustration. When I turned back, the baby was gone. Only the woman remained, her hand resting on the empty space beside her. My breath caught. The closet door creaked open behind me. My pistol was in my hand before I realized I'd drawn it. The hallway light above me flickered, casting long, hungry shadows. I took a step back, another child's cry, closer now, echoing from the dark closet. My boots scraped the wooden floor. Something moved inside. My flashlight beam quivered as I aimed. Then the crying stopped. Complete silence. Too quiet. I whispered, "State Patrol 51," voice steady despite the horror twisting my gut. "Open this door." No answer. My finger tightened around the trigger. Heart slamming, I pressed forward, flashlight carving through the darkness. The air smelled sour, like acid. I reached for the closet knob. It turned with a reluctant groan. Inside stood a rocking chair, gently swaying. Empty. The lamp on the floor beside it shattered, no glass, no bulb, yet I felt the warmth of glowing filaments against my cheek. A hoarse whisper curled around my name. Jackson. My pulse froze mid-thump. I shut the closet door and crouched low, flashlight sweeping the walls, the bed, the hallway. Every instinct screamed to run, but I knew I couldn't leave until I was sure no one else was inside. The man on the porch. Where was he? Had he already fled? My radio crackled to life at that moment, an unfamiliar voice whispering, "Proceed with caution." Then silence. I swallowed, steadied my breath, and backed toward the door. Behind me, the baby's cry started again, soft, urgent, coming from the darkness beyond the hallway. My pistol shook. My reflection bobbed in the broken mirror across from me, eyes wide, chest heaving. I exhaled slowly. "I'm coming," I whispered. And I stepped into the corridor. I pressed my back against the cold wood of the door frame and closed my eyes for a fraction of a second, just long enough to collect myself, to remember that I was still breathing, still alive. When I opened them, the corridor stretched out before me like a tunnel of gloom, the beam of my flashlight carving shallow pools of light in the darkness. Every plank in the ceiling overhead looked ready to collapse. Every shadow seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at it. I stepped out into the hall, each footfall muffled by the thick layer of dust on the floor. My heart was hammering so loud I could almost hear it in my helmet mic. I forced myself to move methodically, scanning each door, each corner, not letting my nerves get the better of me. The woman's bedroom door was closed now, its paint flaking in curling strips. The knob cold metal against my gloved palm. I noticed then the faint imprint of a child's hand, maybe a year old, pressed into the dirt at the base of the door. A tiny smudge, nothing more than a stain, but in that moment it felt like a scream. I keyed my radio again. "Unit 51 to dispatch. Status update." Static. Nothing but white noise that crackled like broken glass. I could taste the grit in my mouth. I cleared my throat. "Unit 51, can anyone hear me?" "Backup status?" My own voice sounded alien, distant, as if it were coming from someone else's throat. I shook my head, unable to stand the sound, and flicked the mic shut. Turning back to the closed door, I pushed my shoulder against it. It swung inward on one rotten hinge, the scrape of wood against wood a slow, agonizing sound. My light swung around the room in a lazy arc. A child's nursery, peeling pale blue wallpaper decorated with cartoon bears. A chipped white dresser with one drawer pulled halfway out, casting a shadow at an angle that looked almost human. The crib sat in the corner, its mattress mildewed, sheets gone, stains dark and ingrained. I crouched beside it, shining my light across the slats. A single baby sock lay on the floor, the toe torn, threads frayed. There was a sound behind me, metal scraping against metal. I spun, light flickering, and saw the dresser drawer inch itself closed as if pulled by an unseen hand. My breath caught in my throat. I swallowed, steeled myself, and approached. The drawer shut with a soft click that echoed through the silent house. My pulse pounded so hard I thought it might burst. I raised my free hand, ready to push the drawer open again, to prove to myself that it had been my imagination. Before I could reach it, a sudden wind rushed through the room, rattling the nursery window even though I hadn't detected any open pane. The curtain whipped like a wounded bird, tearing a strip of wallpaper off the wall. The wind died as suddenly as it had started, leaving only the creaking of the crib rocking back and forth. I heard the faint gurgle of water dripping, somewhere in the walls or ceiling, and I wondered how long the house had been abandoned. I refocused, reminding myself why I was here, a welfare check called in by a passing trucker who'd heard screams. Truckers ran these back roads all night. They saw things, heard things that other people never would. If he reported screaming from this house, there had to be something, someone, in here. But so far, the only living person was the man on the porch, and he'd disappeared. I stood and swept the flashlight through the doorway, then turned to head back out into the hall when the soft whimper came. A child's whimper. Barely louder than a whisper, but undeniable. Emotional terror gripped me. It was unmistakable. The same sound a frightened toddler makes when it's alone in the dark. I froze, heart slamming against my ribs, and listened. The whimper came again, this time more insistent, coming from down the hall toward a door I hadn't yet checked, the one at the very end, which was cracked just enough to let a sliver of shadow leak out. No paint left on that door, just raw, graying wood. Every instinct shouted at me to turn and flee back to my cruiser, slam the door and floor it out of that nightmare. But this was a duty. A life might be in there. I squared my shoulders, lifted my pistol to eye level, and walked down the hall, flashlight beam dancing across cracked door frames. I reached the door and paused. The beam landed on more tiny handprints smeared in dust, climbing up toward the handle. The whimper sounded again, and this time I recognized it as crying, urgent, full of panic. I pressed my ear to the door, cold and damp against my cheek, and heard scuffling, like something or someone was moving about in the room. I tapped gently. "Child in there, it's Officer Jackson. Come to the door." My voice trembled, but I kept it steady. No answer, but the door creaked under the pressure of my knock. I placed one hand on the handle and pushed. The door swung inward silently, revealing a room lit only by the beam of my flashlight. Dust motes floated in the air like pale ghosts. Mirrors everywhere. Every wall covered in floor-to-ceiling mirrors. My reflection multiplied across 100 shards of broken glass, and for a moment I saw not just one Jackson, but dozens of me, each face twisted in fear, and there, huddled in the center, was a small figure. Barefoot, knees drawn to chin, arms wrapped tight, back to the wall. The whimpering stopped when the beam touched the child's face. I saw a little boy, no older than 3, his curls plastered to a pale forehead, eyes wide and brimming with tears. He wore a tiny shirt crusted with dirt. His breathing was rapid, shallow, and he shook as though chilled to the bone or terrified beyond measure. I crouched slowly, keeping my weapon trained on the room. "Hey, buddy," I said softly. "It's okay, you're safe." My voice felt weak. He didn't move. His mouth opened, making a quiet sound that might have been a word. "Mama?" Or nothing at all. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small flashlight I carried as a backup, then set my larger weapon aside carefully, sliding it into the holster at my hip. The smaller light I clicked on, it cast a softer glow. I set it on the floor between us and knelt a few feet away. "I'm here to help," I said, though I knew he probably didn't believe me. He flinched when the light settled on him, eyes darting to every dark corner. "Shine it at the mirrors." Shadows flickered there, shifting. I didn't dare look. My stomach clenched. "Can you stand up? Come to me?" He looked back at me, tear tracks gleaming on his cheeks, and whispered something. I leaned in, word by word. "Mom, Daddy, gone." His voice broke. "They left me. God." I swallowed, heart aching. Of course the parents were gone. 2 of the corpses on the bed upstairs must have been his mother and father. The little life had been left alone to die, or worse. My gut twisted so hard I nearly doubled over, but I forced myself to stay crouched, to be the strong one. "You're not alone anymore," I said. "I'm here. We're getting you out." He sniffed, rocking back against the mirrored wall. His eyes darted wide, and he shoved himself away violently, hitting the opposite wall and sliding down until he was sitting, head in hands. The mirrors made him look like a dozen small bodies huddled here. I eased myself back, giving him space, though every instinct inside me screamed to scoop him up, get him out of that house. The whimper rose again, and somewhere within that glass labyrinth I felt the floor tremble, like distant footsteps, or maybe just the house settling, but it didn't feel random. I clicked off the backup light and grabbed my flashlight again. Shadows twisted in the glass, each reflection a silent scream. I flicked my beam around, heart in my throat, until the tiny boy's face reappeared. His tears caught the light, tiny prisms of reflection. "Hey," I said quietly. "Let's get you home, all right?" He didn't answer, but when I held out my hand, he looked up and hesitated. His little fingers flexed. I exhaled. "It's okay, you can trust me." Slowly, painfully, he reached out, fingertips brushing mine. I felt his skin cold as ice. I wrapped my hand around his, careful not to startle him, and helped him to his feet. He was lighter than I expected, shaking like a leaf in a storm. I led him out of the mirrored room, back into the hallway. Each step I took echoed behind us, the boy's small feet scuffing the dust. I glanced at each door as we passed, half expecting something to spring out at us. He pressed close, leaning into me, sobbing silently. My radio crackled again, louder this time. "Unit 51. Backup is 5 minutes out. What's your status?" Relief burned through me. I grabbed the mic. "Unit 51. I've secured 1 juvenile victim. Mother and father found deceased upstairs. Need medical and child services immediately. Please send hazmat and forensic team. Over." As I spoke, the house groaned, a low, hollow sound that reverberated through the walls. The boy stiffened, hand squeezing mine. I looked at him and swore I saw a 3rd pair of eyes in his reflection on the wall, right behind us. My partner's cruiser lights hadn't arrived yet, but somewhere beyond the boarded window, headlights swung side to side. I guided the boy down the stairs, slowing so he wouldn't slip. Every step was a gamble, rot that might give way, nails that might pierce skin, but he needed to get out. At the bottom, he ran ahead a few feet, then turned, looked back over his shoulder as if someone was following us. I kept my flashlight trained on the stairwell and reached the front door just as the engine noise grew louder. I flung it open and stepped outside, pulling the boy into my arms. His little body was trembling against mine. I held him tight, whispering, "You're safe now." In that moment, the sky above the porch registered on me, a deep, bruised purple with stars blinking through thin clouds. The wind had died. Even the nearby pines were still. My partner's cruiser pulled up behind me, lights washing over the dusty porch in harsh blues and reds. I shielded the boy's face from the glare, hugging him closer. "Got him," I said through the commotion, voice strong. "He's alive." But as we backed away, stepping into the glow of the patrol car's headlights, I glanced back at the broken doorway. Just for a second, I thought I saw a small arm wave at me, a pale hand reaching out from the darkness, before the house retreated into the shadows once more. I blinked, and the hand was gone. I handed the little boy over to the paramedic just as the first red and blue strobes swept over the porch. He clung to my uniform shirt, tears still fresh on his cheeks, and buried his face in my shoulder. The medic murmured reassurances to him, soft words I could barely hear over the roar of the ambulance engine warming up behind us. I kept one arm around the boy's shoulders, guiding him gently away from the house and into the back of the rig. As I lifted him, I caught sight of his eyes, wide, glassy, unblinking, as if he still expected someone to reach out from the darkness and drag him back inside. "Stay with us, buddy," the medic said, snapping a seatbelt across the boy's chest. He handed me a small blanket. I draped it over the child's shoulders and patted his head. He didn't look at me. His gaze was fixed on the farmhouse, where a single upstairs window gaped like an empty eye socket. Then, without warning, he whispered, "They're watching." His voice was low, terrified, but calm enough for me to hear. I froze for a moment, heart hammering. Nerves or imagination, or something else? "Who's watching?" I asked gently, leaning into the ambulance just enough for him to see my face. He sniffed, eyes flicking over my shoulder. "Mommy," he said, "she's watching." The paramedic looked at me, eyebrows raised. I forced a tight nod. "We'll get you someplace safe," I promised, though inside I wasn't so sure. I stepped back, closed the ambulance doors, and the engine purred. Lights bounced off the cracked boards of the porch as I walked back toward my partner's cruiser, boots sinking into the gravel. I paused at the threshold, ran a hand across the peeling paint where I'd seen handprints earlier. Cold metal met my palm, the doorknob. For a moment I felt that tug again, as if some unseen presence was pulling me inside. I slid into the driver's seat of the cruiser. The heat hit me instantly, fogging the windows where my jacket brushed the glass. My partner, Officer Mills, was still fumbling with his radio mic. "Where to?" he asked without looking up. "The hospital," I said, exhaling slowly, "and then to CFS for a report." I started the engine, and the rearview mirror caught a flash. The farmhouse window again, dark, silent. As we turned onto the highway, the ambulance's taillights dancing ahead of us, my radio crackled to life. "Unit 51, please confirm victim status." My knuckles whitened around the steering wheel. One juvenile victim, female, approximately 3 years old. Mother and father confirmed deceased. Paramedics en route to Savannah General. "I'll have my full report in 20. I paused, listening for reply. Static, just as before. We drove in silence. The boy's sobs had stopped, traded for quiet humming that filtered back from the ambulance. I glanced in the side mirror. The rig's interior lights glowed dimly, and I thought I saw the boy's head lift, eyes hollow. Then the rig's window went dark behind the tinted glass. Down the center line, only our headlights and the occasional pair of high beams from a passing truck broke the night. At Savannah General, we guided the medic crew through the swinging doors into the emergency bay. The boy was bundled out of the rig, and the paramedics ushered him toward a nurse waiting with a crayon-colored teddy bear. I caught a glimpse of the child's hand twitching toward it, and then he was gone, swallowed by the hospital corridor. I stood in the entrance lobby, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the scent of antiseptic sharp in my nostrils. My partner handed me a clipboard. "Statement?" he asked. I nodded, took the pen. The forms were the same as any other crash or welfare check. Dates, times, observations. But when I wrote observed infant alive but traumatized, and corroborated by witness, trucker, I hesitated. There was so much more. The whispering, the mirrors, the hand in the shadows. I scribbled the basics, knowing the detective assigned to the file would want more. I added a note. Recommend thorough canvass of scene for residual evidence. Possible unaccounted entry. It sounded clinical, but it was all I could muster. By the time I finished, it was close to 3 a.m. My partner and I stood under the harsh lights of the parking garage, rubbing tired eyes. I turned to him. "You ever see anything like that before?" I asked. He shook his head, glancing over at the hospital doors. "Not like whatever that was," he said. "Looks like Collier farmhouse came down in a fire this morning." I stiffened. "Fire?" I echoed. "'Cause undetermined." He shrugged. "They said the team found deep scorch patterns in the attic, like a blowtorch." He paused. "Engineering hasn't ruled out arson." My blood chilled. "A blowtorch?" I muttered. We climbed back into the cruiser to head home, but I couldn't shake the image of the mirrors, those 1,000 reflections of fear. At a stoplight, I rubbed my eyes, leaning my head back. The wet Georgia air seeped through the vent, carrying the faint echo of cycled whispers. I reached for the radio mic. "Dispatch, this is Unit 51. I'm en route back to the station. Over." There was a pause. Then a voice crackled. "Copy that, 51. Be advised, you're clear to return. Detectives will handle follow-up. Out." I tucked the mic away. My partner flicked on the overhead lights inside the cruiser. I exhaled and sat up straight. "You going to get out of the house?" he asked, nodding toward the floorboard where I'd tossed my gloves. I looked down, and there, tucked under the glove box, was the single yellow baby sock. Its tiny toe was torn, threads frayed just like the one I'd picked up upstairs. I stared at it, heart thundering. How did that get there? I hadn't touched it. I hadn't been back in that house. I pulled over onto the shoulder and flicked on the interior dome light. The sock lay limp on the carpet. My partner leaned over. "Thought the kid went with the medics." I nodded, but the sock felt cold in my hand. I dropped it back to the floor. He straightened. "Let's get out of here," he said. I started the engine. We merged onto the dark highway. Behind us, down the road, I thought I saw headlights flicker near an unlit turnoff. I slowed, peering through the windshield. Only empty blackness alongside the pavement and the distant glimmer of a boarded window. The sock on the floor felt like a compass needle spinning out of control. I glanced at my partner. "Did you see that?" I asked quietly. He shook his head. "See what?" I hesitated. "Nothing," I said. We pressed on, tires humming on the asphalt. My radio crackled once more, almost a whisper. "Jackson." It wasn't the dispatcher. It was low, familiar, and it sent ice through my veins. I stared at the dashboard, sweat beading on my brow. Was that the boy's voice, or something else warning me that this was far from over? I gripped the wheel tight and drove on into the night, the rest of the world swallowed by the dark, the sock resting on the floor as proof that some ghosts never let you go. I drove back to the station in a daze, the broken sock still weighing heavy in my pocket. By the time I punched in at 8:15, my partner was already seated behind his desk, rifling through last night's paperwork. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed like angry bees, and every clerk's head turned as I walked past, guessing I'd been on a rough call. I swallowed past the lump in my throat and dropped the sock onto the evidence locker counter. Sergeant Harris appeared a moment later, his bushy mustache twitching with concern. "Jackson," he said, voice low. "Detective Reyes wants to see you, now." I nodded, trying to keep my hands from shaking. In the detective unit's bullpen, Reyes sat behind a cluttered desk scattered with photos, charred timber, broken windows, and a single mirror shard specked with soot. He looked up as I entered. "Corporal Jackson," he said, pointing to a chair. "Sit." I obeyed, tight-lipped. He slid a glossy aerial shot across the desk. "That's Collier property at dawn the morning after the fire." A smudge of white on the burned-out foundation caught my eye. "What is that?" I leaned in. On the step where I'd first found the man, now reduced to ash and concrete, lay something pale, the outline of a sock, faded, scorched at the toe. I couldn't speak, my throat closed up. Detective Reyes studied my face. "You didn't just see a ghost, Jackson. You saw physical evidence." He set his hands flat on the desk. "We need your full statement, and I want your radio logs, any photos you took, everything." The rest of the day passed in a blur. I dictated over and over the events, finding the boy, the corpses, the nursery, the whisper, the sock. My voice grew raw. They fingerprinted the sock, tested it for DNA, dusted for prints on the mirror shards. Every time I passed the burned farmhouse photo on the wall, I felt eyes on me, looming from the charred window frames. By early evening, they had preliminary lab results. The sock's fibers belonged to the toddler. His blood dried into the cotton. No other prints. The mirrors had scorch marks, irregular blisters, consistent with some high heat source, but there was no source on the property that could account for it. And the rocking chair? They found dust patterns showing it had moved well after the fire. I went home to try to sleep, but every corner of my cabin felt too small. Shadows crept along the walls like hungry animals. I lay awake, listening to the hum of the router, every creak of the floorboards sounding like a footstep. At 2 a.m., I heard the faint patter of feet outside my bedroom door. I froze, heart pounding, straining to hear more. Nothing followed. The next morning, I woke at 5:30, ran a cold hand through my hair and headed out. I needed answers, and if official channels were stalled, I'd get them myself. By 6:45, I was back at the Collier lot, coffee in hand. The place was a death zone of ash and blackened beams twisting skyward. A yellow police tape sagged between two charred posts. I ducked under it, ignoring the caution warnings, and stepped onto the ashen floor. The early sun turned the smoke-stained air a sickly gray. I walked past the corner where the sock had lain. My boots crunched on debris, splinters of wood, fragments of glass, and a single bright button from the child's shirt. I picked it up, blue plastic, slightly melted, then dropped it into my pocket. Up above, an attic hatch gaped open. Detective Reyes had said initial crews didn't bother to climb up there. They thought it structurally unsound. But the attic felt like the only place left to look. I found a ladder propped against the remaining wall studs and hauled it upright. Each rung groaned under my weight as I climbed, the smell of smoke and rot stronger with every foot. At the top, the attic was a cathedral of char and dust. Moonlight, shade-filtered as it was, cut through gaps in the roof boards, painting the silt in ghostly beams. In the center, a half-melted mirror lay face-up, warped by heat. Its frame was twisted, the glass cracked into a web of fractures. I knelt beside it, shone my flashlight across the cracks. In one fragment, I thought I could see a reflection, a small, pale face framed by curls. I blinked. Nothing. The attic hatch rattled above me. My heart slammed. I summoned my flashlight and directed it toward the hatch. A wind stirred beneath it. Cold, unnatural. I backed away. The mirror skipped a reflection of the rocking chair against the far wall. one I hadn't seen before. The chair was intact, glossy black, not burned at all. It rocked slowly, creaking. I clamped a hand over my mouth. My breath hitched. I leapt backward as the chair swung around as if pulled by an invisible occupant. The mirror shattered with a sudden crash, shards skittering across the floor. I spun, scrambling for the ladder, but the hatch slammed shut. Darkness swallowed me. Panic drove me upward. Hands slamming the attic door, nails tearing at the wood. At last, the hatch burst open. Daylight poured in. I crawled through and dropped to the floor below, chest heaving. My flashlight skittered across the joists and clattered down inside. Below, the front yard was empty. No officers, no tape, no evidence crews. The entire house site was deserted. I shook my head, sick with adrenaline. I knew I had to document what happened, but there was no way down without that ladder. I stumbled back toward the driveway, boots crunching in the ash. That's when I saw it. Tiny footprints pressed into the gray ash. Bare feet. A line of prints led from the front door toward the tree line. I dropped to my knees and studied them. Perfect little impressions. Heel to toe, stopping where the grass began, as if someone had stepped directly off the ashen ground onto soil. I stood and followed the tracks into the pines. Under the trees, the air was cooler, damp with dew. The footprints ended at a shallow depression in the ground. Broken twigs lay scattered. A torn piece of the child's shirt snagged on a low branch. My flashlight light shattered against the bark. Its battery drained, flickering just once before dying. In the near silence, I heard a whisper behind me. Jackson. I spun, heart hammering. Nothing but trees. Then a soft laugh, like a child's giggle, so close I almost felt breath on my neck. I whipped around again, but I was alone. A gust of wind swept through the clearing, and in its wake, the echo of a lullaby. Tinny, distorted, impossible. I stumbled back the way I'd come, trusting memory of the footprints to guide me. When I emerged onto the gravel drive, my cruiser was waiting, engine idling. No one inside. The door was cracked open. I climbed in, slammed the door, and locked it. My hands shook so badly I had to grip the wheel with both arms. I ripped off my jacket, draped it across the passenger seat, and drove away without looking back. At the station, I reported the footprints and the attic incident. Detective Reyes listened, taking notes, expression grim. He promised more crews and a thermal sweep that night. But I knew they wouldn't find anything. No bodies, no evidence of human presence. That evening, I found myself on the edge of sleep, but every time I closed my eyes I saw those charred beams and the black rocking chair, swinging empty. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Detective Reyes. Thermal scan shows heat signature moving inside foundation perimeter. Recommend you suit up. My blood ran cold. I put on my uniform, tucked my pistol in its holster, grabbed a spare magazine and flashlight, and left my home at 2:30 a.m. I drove out to the lot under a new moon. A darkness so complete, it felt like I was driving through ink. This time, I didn't pause. I slipped under the tape, approaching the concrete footprint line. The thermal sweep had shown a warm shape crawling beneath the slab, something alive. I knelt at the edge of the crumbling wall, peered through a gap. In the blackness beneath the floor, just visible in my flashlight's beam, I saw the small body curled in a ball, eyes closed, breathing shallow. I froze. The child, alive, inside the burned foundation? My radio crackled. "Jackson, can you hear me?" It was Reyes whispering. I spoke softly. "I see him." I drew my pistol, holstered my flashlight, and patted around the edge until I found a low opening. Crawling inside, the air was hotter, musty. full of dust. My knees scraped against broken rebar. The boy lay huddled, shirt threadbare, sockless. He stirred as I knelt, blinking against the glare. "It's me," I whispered. "I'm here." He looked at me, face pinched with pain, eyes burning. He murmured, "Mommy. Daddy." I reached for him, but before my hand touched his shoulder, the space around us glowed with a blinding heat. Flames flickered along the edges of the concrete slab, burning alive in slow motion, but without smoke or pain. I jerked back, yanked my light up. The boy had vanished, and in his place sat the rocking chair, half submerged in ash, its black paint gleaming in the crawling fire. I scrambled out, heart pounding, and the foundation collapsed behind me in a whisper of flames and dust. I landed on my knees, coughing. When I looked up, the property was empty again, the house gone entirely, replaced by a smooth field of gray ash. No charred beams, no footprints, no molten mirror. Even the tape was gone. Alone on the cold earth, with nothing but ashes at my feet, I realized the boy was still out there, somewhere between worlds, tethered to that place by whatever had claimed his parents. And I wondered, with the weight of every whisper in my ears, if I was next to be drawn back. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the black rocking chair swinging back and forth in the attic, heard the faint giggle of a child echoing through the charred beams. At 3:15 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Detective Reyes. "Operation tonight at 200 hours. Meet at the lot." I rubbed the grit from my eyes, pulled on my uniform, and swallowed 2 black coffees before I felt steady enough to drive. The drive out to the Collier property felt endless. Highway lights flickered past in slow motion, and my cruiser's heater rattled like a wounded animal. My dash cam blinked its timestamp. 1:47 a.m., March 12th. Just under 2 hours since I'd last been there, but it felt like a lifetime. I parked behind the detectives' SUVs and a cluster of unmarked vans. K, 9 unit, fire marshal, hazmat, and a private excavation crew Reyes had hired. Yellow floodlights cut triangles of brightness into the night, illuminating the ashen field where the house once stood. Reyes met me at the edge of the site, face grim beneath his baseball cap. He handed me a thick notebook. "That's the site map and notes from the thermal scan," he said. "Ground-penetrating radar shows a cavity running from the old attic hatch down under the foundation, like a buried tunnel. I want you frontline, coordinate the search." I nodded, thumb tracing the dotted line on the map. "I won't let him down," I said. Behind me, the K-9 team flanked a pair of German shepherds, their handlers quiet as they prepped the dog's night vision goggles and infrared trackers. We spread out around the perimeter, flashlights bobbing in synchronized arcs. The excavation crew marked off a 2-foot grid with spray paint, and heavy equipment began scraping away the thin layer of ash. I stayed close to Reyes as he monitored his tablet, watching live thermal readings. Every time a patch of ground glowed faintly warmer, the crew lowered a metal detector and sifted the earth by hand. Rain threatened on the horizon, low clouds and distant thunder. A storm would complicate everything. About 40 minutes in, a crew foreman called out, "Found something!" He knelt in the mud, pried up a charred fragment of what looked like a toy car. Its paint peeled, wheels fused, but the shape was unmistakable, a child's matchbox. I crouched beside him, ran my gloved finger over the warped metal. The handle of the car still bore a thumbprint too small for an adult. I closed my eyes, fought the wave of nausea. "Bag it," I said quietly. "Label it evidence." Not far off, the dogs began to bark, sharp, urgent. Their handlers swung infrared torches down a shallow trench. A dark shape lay half buried at the trench's edge, a crumpled teddy bear, its stitching torn, fur singed. I knelt again, lifted it gently by one arm. I recognized it instantly. The same teddy bear the medics had given the boy in Savannah General's ER, the one I'd only seen in photos. My heart hammered. This was no coincidence. The storm broke then, sheets of rain drenching us in seconds. Floodlights blurred into halos. Equipment shut down as generators sputtered. Dogs whimpered, handlers cursed. We scrambled to secure gear, but I was transfixed. The trench where we'd found the bear stretched toward the foundation rubble, water pooling inside like a shallow pond. I stood at the trench's lip, soaked through, flashlight beam slicing through the rain onto the murky water. "Jackson," Reyes barked over the wind. "We're pulling out until first light." He waved his arms, but I didn't move. My eyesight blurred, but in the water I saw shapes shifting, small limbs, pale and twisting beneath the surface. I knelt down, raising an arm to shield my face from the rain. The shapes sank, only the faint glint of a child's earring flashing for a moment. Then nothing but muddy water and reflections of the floodlights. I unsnapped my radio. "Unit 51 to all units. Report in." Static. Then a soft voice crackled through, so quiet I rubbed my ear. "Jackson, come down." It sounded like a whisper carried on the wind. I stood, dripping, and scanned the trench walls. The earthen sides were imprinted with footprints, tiny toes pressing deep into soft soil. They led into a collapsed section of broken slab. I crawled in, shoved aside roots and debris, flashlight beam dancing over jagged concrete edges. Inside, the cavity was a low tunnel, maybe 2 feet high, 3 feet wide, lined with ash and dust. My flashlight reflected off smears on the walls, childish handwriting in black soot. Words. "Mama, please hear." I whispered them to myself, swallowed hard. I felt my uniform stick to my skin, heart pounding like a drum. Every instinct screamed to back away, but I pressed forward, dragging my knees across gritty rubble. The tunnel angled down toward darkness. Rainwater dripped from above, landing on my helmet with hollow splats. The writing grew more frantic. "Don't go. He takes. Help me." My flashlight caught a flash of red. Crayon wax melted into the wall. I crouched, traced the lines. A stick-figure family holding hands, the smallest figure drawn apart, arms outstretched. A jitter in the trench overhead made me freeze. The boards of the foundation above creaked, then groaned, as if someone was pacing back and forth. I called out, "Child, if you're here, you're safe. Come to my voice." Silence answered. My pulse thundered. I edged deeper, shuffling through the mud. The tunnel opened into a small chamber, maybe 6 by 4 feet. In the center lay the boy's sock, pristine and unburned, as if dropped moments ago. Beside it, a small wooden nameplate charred around the edges. "Jonathan." I swallowed, voice shaking. "Jonathan?" No reply. I crouched, right hand hovering above the sock. The air in the chamber was stifling, thick with electricity. My flashlight flickered, then died. Darkness swallowed me. I fumbled for the backup light clipped to my belt. It clicked on, casting a narrow cone of illumination. The tunnel behind me glowed, dark red embers pulsing like a heartbeat. I spun around. The entrance had collapsed, replaced by a wall of shifting ash that glowed with feverish heat. I pounded on it. "Help me!" My voice sounded tinny in the confined space. Then I heard the child's cry. 2 tones, overlapping, one terrified, one distant. The walls vibrated with each syllable. "Papa! Papa!" My blood froze. The cracked foundation above me moaned. I pressed my flashlight against the wall, looking for a weakness. Something scraped at my helmet. child-sized fingers brushing the outer shell. I jerked back, breath catching. Rainwater seeped into the chamber through cracks overhead, sizzling on impact. The heat grew unbearable. I dropped to my knees, scraped at the ash wall with my flashlight handle. Scratches gouged into gray layers, but the wall held fast. The crying intensified, then stopped abruptly. Silence. Then the tunnel behind me shivered, and a hand reached through the narrow slit of collapsed rubble, pale and small. I gasped, scrambled backward, bumping into the chamber's back wall. The figure emerged, a tiny boy, his shirt in tatters, eyes dull and lifeless. He raised one finger to his lips. "Shh," he whispered. My heart froze. His mouth moved, but no sound came. The embers in the wall behind me flared, illuminating the chamber in a fiery glow. He stepped closer, each movement deliberate. The heat scorched my skin. Sweat dripped into my eyes. I swallowed hard, voice hoarse. "Jonathan, you're safe now. Come with me." He lifted a hand, pointing upward. The rubble above trembled, revealing a sliver of sky, lightning flashing in the distance. He smiled faintly, lips cracking. The hush before a storm hung heavy. He took a step and then vanished into the wall of embers, as if absorbed by the heat itself. The chamber exploded in light. I raised my flashlight, shielding my eyes. When I looked again, the sock lay alone, and the tunnel entrance had reopened. The ash wall lay broken, a jagged opening leading back into the mud-filled trench. I crawled out, chest heaving, blood pounding in my ears. Behind me, the child's sock, soaked in rainwater, glittered in the floodlight's glare. Teams had gathered at the trench edge, flashlights converging on me. Reyes was running forward, rain streaking down his face. "Jackson, what the hell happened?" He skidded to a stop. I pointed at the sock. "He was in there. He showed me." My voice cracked. Then he vanished. Reyes eyed the chamber with horror. "We have to seal it," he said, but his voice wavered. I swallowed. "He's not done. He's still out there." He stared at me, mouth open. "We'll regroup in the morning," he said finally. "Get some rest." But rest was impossible. The K9 unit packed up in silence, dogs whimpering. I stood alone in the rain, rainwater washing ash down my neck. Ahead, the collapsed tunnel glowed faintly before fading to gray. I looked for footprints in the mud, but found only my own. That night, back at home, I left my uniform on the floor and lay on my mattress, fully clothed, boots and all. I heard distant thunder roll across the sky, and I thought I heard a child humming a lullaby outside my window. I sat up, pulse racing. The room was empty, except for the sock draped over the corner of my nightstand. I reached out, fingertips grazing the soft cotton. It felt warm, almost alive. I yanked it away, hard in my throat, and flicked on the light. The sock lay there, innocuous. No burn marks, no stains. Just a child's sock calling me back. I woke before dawn, staring at the sock on my nightstand as a cold knot twisted in my gut. The cotton lay limp, its pale yellow hue unnaturally vivid in the dim hallway light that bled through my curtains. I pressed my palm to my chest, willing my heartbeat to slow, but all I felt was the echo of tiny footsteps running across my skull. My uniform hung at the foot of the bed, still damp from the rain and ash. I knew I couldn't stay here waiting for ghosts to come calling, so when my phone buzzed at 2:03 with Detective Reyes's message, "New sighting at mile marker 107, be there ASAP," I was already pulling on boots and grabbing my flashlight. The drive out was drenched in heavy silence, punctuated only by the thrum of tires on wet asphalt and the distant sigh of 18-wheelers passing in pairs. Mile marker 107 sat just beyond a curve where the road cut through a stand of magnolias, their blossoms wilting under the weight of last night's downpour. I slowed, scanning both shoulders for motion. Headlights from my cruiser lit up glints. Broken glass from someone else's roadside tragedy. A stray plastic cup. Then something small and pale curled on the gravel. I killed the engine and nudged my door open. Steam hissed out, curling like smoke around my legs. Kneeling, I shone my beam on the curled form. It was the boy, asleep in fetal position, shirt shredded, backpack open beside him. Empty hip flask vials rolling in the mud. I lifted my voice softly. "Hey, buddy, wake up." His eyelids fluttered, and he blinked up at me. Eyes that should have been brown, but looked molten in the flashlight's glare. He tried to sit up, wincing. I knelt farther, keeping my tone steady. "You're safe. I'm here to help." He stared for a long moment, then whispered, "They said I had to come back." His words hit like a punch. I reached out to steady him, feeling his tiny frame tremble. I lifted him gently into my arms and carried him to the passenger seat, settling him onto the blanket Reyes's team had left behind. He tucked his knees to his chest, hugging himself like he might shatter if he stretched out. I closed the door carefully and clicked my radio. Unit 51 has visual on Juvenile. Location mile marker 107. Requesting transport and child services. The static crackled. In the pause that followed, I heard the faintest echo of giggling carried on the wind. So distant I wasn't sure it was real. The boy broke the silence. "Can we go back now?" he asked, voice so small I nearly missed it. "Back to where it started." I glanced at the empty seat beside him. No khaki field, no cracked dashboard, just the ragged edge of the blanket. "We've got to get you somewhere safe first," I said. "Hospital, then?" He shook his head. "No hospital." He slid out of his seat, feet barely brushing the floor. Before I could react, he dashed toward the open driver's door, hands pressed to the windshield from the inside, eyes wide. "Follow me," he mouthed. Instinct screamed at me to grab him, but I slid out, running after his silhouette as it wove between the floodlights that still marked the Collier site. He didn't speak. He simply led me past the smashed-in foundation until we reached the stump of the ash tree where the tunnel entrance had once been. The ground trembled faintly under my boots, and smoke curled up from cracks in the earth. "This way," he said, pointing to a fissure that hadn't been there before, just a sliver of black among the gray. He crouched and slipped inside. I drew my pistol, clipped my light to the barrel, and followed, breath held tight. Inside, the walls glowed softly with embers that danced in time with my pulse. The air tasted of rust and sorrow. He stopped at a patch where the soot had been cleared, revealing fresh, child-sized footprints leading deeper. I shone the beam down the corridor. Years of ash had settled in dust that whispered in the beam. At the end, a single pair of tiny bare feet lay pressed into the floor, soles streaked red. The boy knelt and placed his hand over the prints. "I'm ready," he said. Silence wrapped around us. My radio crackled to life, Detective Reyes's voice, urgent. "Jackson, do you copy?" "You're off-grid." I keyed the mic. "I'm here. I have him." The hiss of static swallowed my words. He stood and guided me forward. The corridor opened into a cavern, drenched in flickering light. 50 mirrors, each cracked and blackened, leaning against the walls in a semicircle. At their center, the rocking chair sat, freshly painted jet black, its wood grain gleaming wet. He climbed into the seat and looked up at me, expression unreadable. "Sit," he said. My breath caught. I took a step back. "Not yet," he whispered. Then, in unison, the mirrors reflected a dozen versions of us, some smiling, some twisted in fear. The boy's face in each was stoic. Then they shifted, showing him alone, floating in darkness, eyes void. My heart thundered. "What do you want?" I asked, voice echoing. The chair rocked, slow and steady. "To go home," he said, "with you." My throat clenched. "You can't come with me," I choked out. "There's nowhere safe for you." He cut me off, voice hard. "I'm already dead." The words landed like icicles. I stumbled back. He stood, stepping away, and the mirrors shattered one by one. Glass raining down in slow motion. A chorus of shattering screams. I heard my own reflection cry out, though my lips hadn't moved. He vanished into the smoke that rose from the cracks in the floor. The chair slumped forward, empty. I raised my light, panicked, illuminating only ash and scattered shards. My knees hit the ground. The corridor trembled, then collapsed in behind me with a roar, like 1,000 tires blowing out at once. I crawled back the way I'd come, rainwater and dust slick under my palms. When I emerged into the moonlit clearing, my cruiser was idling, engine warm, lights off. I sprinted to the driver's door. It swung open to reveal the front seat empty, sock gone. No sign he'd ever been there except a single smear of ash on the upholstery. I climbed in, locked the doors, and jabbed the key in the ignition. The engine fired, and I backed out onto the highway without looking back, tires throwing gravel into the darkness. As I passed mile marker 107, the sign's reflective paint glowed, a cold, lifeless beacon in the night. At the station, Reyes met me at the door, coat pulled tight against the damp. "Where is he?" His eyes were furious. "I don't know," I whispered, voice hollow. "I left him in there." He frowned, then noticed my blank look. "You look like hell." I sank to my knees, head in my hands. From my pocket I pulled the sock, crisp and clean as if brand new. He reached for it, but I jerked it back. "Don't touch it." He stared, uncertain, as I pressed it to my face. Its warmth seeped through the fabric. "He's not gone," I said. "He never will be." That night, I drove home in silence, leaving my cruiser idling until the fuel gauge dipped. Back inside my house, I flicked on every light, pacing rooms that felt smaller than ever. At one point, I caught movement in the hallway mirror, an echo of a child's silhouette flickering just behind my shoulder. I spun, but saw nothing. The mirror fogged over, and 3 tiny handprints appeared, pressed from the inside, smudging the glass. My breath caught. I raised my hand to wipe at them, but stopped. The prints pulsed faintly, as if breathing. I stared until the fog cleared, leaving only the dull reflection of the empty hallway. My pulse thundered in my ears. Somewhere in the dark, a lullaby began to play. Tinny, distorted, carried on a breeze that shouldn't exist indoors. I followed it to my bedroom door, opened it slow. The sock lay on the pillow next to an infant's toy car, unburned and gleaming under the lamp's cold light. I felt the floorboards shift beneath me. I swallowed against a lump in my throat. I knew someone, or something, was in my house. I knew I wasn't alone. And as the lullaby wound down into a final, distant giggle, I forced a question past the lump of terror in my chest, not knowing if I wanted an answer. Who, or what, was I bringing home with me? I eased the patrol car to a stop on the gravel shoulder, the wheels crunching over shale and broken glass. The tail lights of my Ford Interceptor glowed red against the night sky, painting the cornfields in deep ruby hues. I killed the engine, and the sudden quiet pressed in around me, only the low hum of distant crickets and the faint whoosh of highway traffic a mile down the road. My breath came out in white puffs, though the thermometer read a mild 65 degrees. Something about that calm unsettled me more than a raging storm ever could. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. The pale glare of the overhead light revealed sweat beading on my forehead and tension around my jawline. "Jackson," I muttered into the darkness. "You got this." I clicked off the dome light and grabbed my flashlight, hand resting on the grip of my service pistol holstered at my side. The call had come 20 minutes ago. A young woman, living alone in a weathered farmhouse set back from US 95, heard glass breaking below and whispered frantic words about footsteps tracking her upstairs. Then her voice cut out, leaving only static. My radio crackled once. "Back up ETA 10 minutes, dispatch said. Too slow, too exposed. Trooper Rivera's cruiser would roll in eventually, but for now, this was my solo beat. I choked down a swallow of caffeine gum and stepped onto the pebbled walk, flashlight beams slicing the dark in a 10-foot cone. Moonlight barely filtered through a thin veil of clouds, casting the farmhouse in shifting patches of shadow. The front porch sagged under age, planks warped and splintered. I rapped the barrel of my flashlight against the door frame. Nothing. A closer look revealed the downstairs window. The lower sash burst inward, shards littering a crooked wooden box filled with dead leaves. Perfect for a terrified homeowner's escape route, or an intruder's entrance. I turned on the radio mic. "Jackson to dispatch, window entry confirmed, proceeding inside." No answer. I pressed my back against the weathered siding, glancing toward the cornfields where stalks swayed silently in the breeze. Out here, help could be miles away. I slipped through the broken pane, careful to avoid the larger shards. Glass crunched under my boots as I lowered myself into the dim kitchen. The air smelled of stale dust and old cooking oil. My flashlight beam swept across wooden cabinets bowed by humidity, a cast-iron skillet still stained with grease on the stove, and a ragged table where a half-empty coffee mug sat, abandoned in haste. I announced myself, "Oregon State Patrol. Anyone here, respond now." My voice seemed swallowed by the thick walls. Static hissed in my earpiece. I clicked my flashlight to high beam and swept toward the shadowed hallway. Every nerve bristled. The floorboards creaked under each cautious step, sending a skitter of panic through my chest. My left hand hovered near my sidearm. My right arm held the light steady. I advanced slowly, ears straining for any sound beyond my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. At the base of the stairs I paused. The carpet runner was worn thin, showing dark spots as if from mud and old spills. A half-lit wall sconce flickered, its bulb on the brink of burning out. I pressed up against the banister, listening. Silence. I swallowed, reminding myself that every sound here, every creak, every whisper of wind could be my imagination. But I knew better. Out here, shadows could reach out with deadly intent. I climbed the steps 2 at a time, tension coiling in my shoulders. At the top, a narrow hallway stretched left and right, rooms on either side. The final 9/11 ping had come from the east bedroom. I eased the door open, flashlight cutting through the gloom. The room was small, walls painted baby blue years ago, now faded and stained. A single twin bed stood against the far wall, its sheets twisted. I spotted footprints in the dust on the wooden floor, adult size, barefoot. I cleared my throat. "Ma'am, it's Trooper Jackson. Are you here?" My voice sounded too loud, echoing off the ceiling. At the foot of the bed, a woman sat with her back to me, hugging her knees. Her hair hung loose, tangled. I trained my light on her. She flinched but remained silent. "I'm here to help," I said, keeping my tone calm. "Walk toward me with your hands visible." She rose slowly, feet bare against the cold wood. In the moonlight, I saw dark circles under her eyes and trembling hands. She shook her head once, eyes darting. I lowered my gun but kept my finger on the guard. "Who else is here?" My words barely a whisper. Her voice came out in a quiver. He's under the bed." My heart jumped. Under the bed. I glanced at the low frame. Legs, black boots. I moved around the side, flashlight pointed under the mattress. A pale face, eyes wide with fear or malice. A knife glinted briefly. I spun, drawing my pistol. "Come out slowly, hands where I can see them." The shape under the bed froze. Seconds stretched into an eternity. I radioed, "Suspect under the bed, in custody pending," but my mic refused to carry. The hush crushed me. My ears roared with adrenaline. I took a breath, steady, measured, then swept the beam again. No movement. I moved forward, every muscle coiled. I clicked my flashlight off, stepping into total darkness. The intruder relied on my light. "Good," I whispered. "If you move, you die." No answer. I slid on my knees, hand outstretched. Fingers grazed coarse denim. I grabbed the ankle, yanked. The body slid out, groaning. A man in black coveralls and a ski mask lay on his back, chest heaving. His eyes met mine, unblinking. I kicked his hands away from the knife, cuffed him in one smooth motion. "You're done," I said, voice hollow. He said nothing. I yanked him to his feet, hands zipping behind. The woman backed against the wall, silent tears tracing tracks down her cheeks. I gestured toward the door. "Come on, let's get you safe." Behind me, the hallway light flickered again. I glanced over my shoulder. Footsteps echoed from deeper in the house. Another set, lighter steps, like someone creeping. My pulse rocketed. I spun, gun trained down the corridor, nothing visible. My flashlight beam trembled. I pressed closer to the wall, ear to the door. The steps stopped. Then a soft click, like a lock turning somewhere else. A door at the far end of the hallway, not the bedrooms. The kitchen? The bathroom? I couldn't tell. I whispered into my throat mic, "Rivera, if you copy, back door locked?" No response. I forced myself to stay calm, sweep the area, clear every room. But the woman needed help now. I led her downstairs, guiding her through the kitchen and out onto the porch. She clung to me, body shaking. Outside, the air felt fresher but colder. Sirens wailed in the distance. Backup at last. I turned to escort her to my cruiser when I heard it, metal scraping against glass behind me. I froze. Behind the front window, someone dragging something across the pane from the inside. A thin, deliberate scratch. My breath caught. I raised my pistol again. "Stay here," I ordered, grabbing the handset from my belt. 4 strong knocks rattled the door. My name. A voice. Trooper Rivera. Relief hit like a punch. I opened the door for her, then shone my light back at the farmhouse. The front window where the intruder had first come in now looked untouched, glass intact, no broken pane. My mind raced. I looked at the woman, her eyes wide in terror. I asked, "Did you see anyone else?" She shook her head, but her foot tapped the gravel as if ready to bolt. I felt the hairs on my neck stand up. Something wasn't right. Couldn't be right. The house's layout, the broken window, the second figure under the bed, but now that window was whole. A trick of my flashlight, or something more. I motioned Rivera back and whispered, "Check the east bedroom again. Now." Her silhouette receded into the dark hall. I stayed outside, protecting the terrified woman. Sirens grew louder. I watched the farmhouse, every shadow alive. And when the back door creaked open behind me, I barely had time to spin before a hand clamped on my shoulder. The world tilted, and my pistol skidded across the gravel. I felt someone breath hot in my ear. "You shouldn't have come here alone, trooper." The grip tightened. My heart slammed. I tasted copper in my mouth. And as the sirens wailed closer, I realized I might not make it out alive. The hand felt like ice as it clamped around my shoulder. My heart slammed against my ribs, and every instinct screamed to spin and fire. But my pistol lay useless on the gravel where it had skidded moments ago. The grip tightened, and my world narrowed to the sound of my own ragged breathing and the cold press of fabric against my neck. I tasted copper on my tongue. Behind me, the farmhouse's broken window gleamed under the porch light, as if mocking how brittle reality had become. "Trooper Jackson," a voice hissed, low and cruel. My training screamed at me, "Don't comply, don't let him see fear." Yet I could feel every flicker of panic shot through my spine. I forced my voice out, steady but low. "Who the hell are you?" No answer. Instead, the hand shifted, fingertips brushing the base of my skull. Whoever this was, they'd studied police procedure. They knew I'd be disarmed and vulnerable once I dropped my weapon. My boots scraped across the gravel as I pivoted on my good foot, trying to spot my attacker in the darkness. The silhouette that emerged under the porch light was impossibly tall, too long-limbed for any normal man. He wore a black duffel bag slung over one shoulder and a mask stretched tight across his face. Cloth, old and fraying at the edges, with eye holes burned clean. His jacket was lined with pockets. Extra magazines? Tools? I couldn't be sure. He pulled me close, voice rasping. "You shouldn't have left her alone." It clicked. He referred to Miss Thompson, out here on the porch, pale and terrified. "What have you done with her?" I rasped. He let go for a heartbeat and I stumbled forward. Behind me, that desperate woman's sobs broke the night's lull, and I heard Rivera shout my name from somewhere behind the house. The intruder raised a finger to his lips. In that instant, I found my edge. Adrenaline surging, I lunged backward, sending him off balance. A muffled grunt, and he staggered against a porch post. I dove for my pistol, teeth gritted. The barrel felt cold in my hand. I spun, training the sight on his chest. "Get away from her," I warned. He froze, a twisted grin tightening under the mask. His eyes glittered with something feral. "She's the reason I'm here," he said, voice hollow. Then, shifting the duffel bag, he jerked it toward me. "You're going to help me." Before I could react, crackling shouts cut through the dark. Rivera, backup, horns blazing down the long driveway. Lights swept across the field, blue and red dancing on the walls of the house. The intruder's posture flickered between tense aggression and cold calculation. He pressed his lips close to my ear, cold breath brushing my skin. "Tell them I have her inside." He nodded toward the farmhouse, his other hand pointing at the front door. Rivera came into view, pistol drawn, shouting commands I couldn't hear. I steadied my voice. "Man with hostage inside. Don't rush him." I backed away slowly, holding my gun trained on him. He nodded curtly, then slipped off the porch, fast, silent, almost inhuman. I radioed dispatch with my free hand. "Jackson to dispatch. Suspect moving into the house, likely with hostage. Proceed with extreme caution." No sooner had the words left my mouth than he bolted toward the front door, disappearing into those inky shadows. I sprinted across the porch, heart pounding. Rivera was halfway up the steps, her light swinging across the cracked window and shattered sill. Together, we ducked through the broken pane, guns raised. Inside, the kitchen smelled of dust and cold metal. The floor was littered with fragments of glass, the table overturned. We moved as a unit, me to the left, Rivera to the right, each footstep echoing like gunfire in the empty room. I signaled toward the stairs with my elbow. Rivera swept the ground floor. I hugged the banister and began the climb. Each step felt slower than the last, the tension coiling tighter. My flashlight beam trembled, illuminating nothing but peeling wallpaper. At the top, I saw the east bedroom door ajar, light flickering behind it. I pressed my back against the wall, breathing hard. "Rivera!" I hissed. "He's here!" She appeared behind me, flashlight and pistol aligned. "On 3, she whispered. 1, 2, 3. We kicked the door together. Inside, the room was in chaos. Sheets torn, furniture overturned, no sign of Thompson and no intruder. My blood ran cold. I swept the beam over the floor where we'd cuffed him under the bed just minutes ago, but now the mattress lay empty. "The bag," Rivera said, pointing at the black duffel slung over a nightstand. I flipped it open. Inside were her shoes, her purse, and, my stomach dropped, a folded shirt stained with sweat. No sign of a body. My mind raced. "He used the noise to get her out another way," I said. "Main door, back door?" We scanned the room. The window here was unbroken. The back, through the bathroom, led to a hallway. We darted out. The hallway light was out. I tapped the bulb, sputtered. We moved in near darkness, hands brushing walls. At the end lay the bathroom, door closed, exhale. I jammed my shoulder into it. Rivera kicked. It burst open. Inside, a single-pane window looked out onto the backyard. The latch was sprung. Footprints in the mud led away toward the cornfield, deep and wide. "No time," Rivera said, already moving. We bolted back downstairs, racing through the kitchen and out the back door. The night air slapped us as we plunged into the tall stalks, flashlights bobbing, rays lost in thick rows of corn. The footprints zigzagged as if he'd changed direction. We called out, her name, his name, any sound, but the field swallowed our voices. A distant siren wailed again, closer this time. I cursed under my breath. We had to find her, had to stop him. I followed the tracks to where the ground flattened. An old irrigation ditch ran through here. The footprints stopped at the edge. I crouched, heart hammering, chest tight. The bag lay open on the bank, empty. My breath blew misty in front of me. He couldn't leave without her, I murmured. Rivera turned a pale face toward me. "Then he took her under," she said, voice shaking. We pressed deeper into the ditch. The earth was damp, boots sinking. Every nerve screamed. Then, a soft gurgle. Water. We crawled forward, flashlights low, until I saw her, or what remained. Her jacket snagged on a bramble by the water's edge. The cuff bore my name. Jackson. My hand closed around the fabric, heart twisting. Only then did I see her, face down in the murky water, hair floating in dark tendrils. I leaned forward, flashlight illuminating her pale cheek, eyes open but unseeing. My stomach lurched. The world narrowed to the sound of my own gasp. Rivera shouted something, but I couldn't hear. My pistol slipped free from my grasp, clattering against mud. Trembling, I reached in, fingertips brushing cold skin. "Miss Thompson?" My voice cracked. No response, only the gentle ripple of water. Tears blurred my vision, salt stinging as they fell. A sudden rustle behind me. I spun, eyes wild, scanning the cornfield's edge. There, just beyond the stalks, he stood, mask removed. His face was pale, calm, expression unreadable. In his hand was my service badge, gleaming silver. He held it up like a trophy. Then he smiled, slow and satisfied, before stepping back into the corn. The stalks hissed shut behind him. I dropped to my knees in the ditch, lunging for her, but the water slipped through my fingers. The badge sank into the mud beside her. My world shattered into fragments. Siren lights, crickets, the distant whisper of wind. The field seemed endless, swallowing every plea. And as the first rescue lights cut through the rows, I realized I couldn't save her. My radio crackled, but I didn't answer. I stayed rooted by the water's edge, shaking, unable to pull her free. In the hush that followed, the cornfield breathed around me, and I knew one truth. Some calls end without closure, and the darkness keeps its own secrets. The sirens slammed into life around me, red and blue strobes slicing through the cornstalks. I barely heard the shouting of medics behind me as they skidded to a stop, boots thudding against the damp earth. I stayed on my knees, chest heaving, head bowed over Miss Thompson's motionless form, cold, unresponsive, the water's surface rippling with her final breath. A paramedic tore off gloves and knelt beside me, voice urgent. "Trooper, step back. We need space." I didn't move, not yet. My fingers still tangled in her jacket cuff, clutching the silver badge that had betrayed her. A hand on my shoulder jolted me upright. It was Rivera, eyes wide beneath her helmet light. "Jackson, she's gone. They've pronounced her." I nodded, but it felt like my whole body had been pronounced dead. I barely registered the paramedics' murmured commands over the radio, the detectives arriving, flashlights carving angles into the cornfield. Everything blurred, the rustle of cornstalks, the wail of the siren, the slap of rain starting against my cheek. I stood, every muscle locked, and let them pull me back. They lifted her onto a stretcher and carried her away, white sheet flapping like a wounded bird. Detective Harper approached, notebook in hand, eyes sympathetic yet clinical. "Trooper Jackson, I'm Detective Harper with the Harney County Sheriff's Office. Can you tell me what happened?" My voice came out as a croak. I recounted the call. Broken window, footsteps upstairs, the man under the bed, the escape into the field, the body in the ditch, the badge in his hand. Each word felt like a scalpel twisting inside me. Harper nodded, scribbled furiously. "You're certain you saw him drop the badge there?" I pointed at the mud and bramble. He smiled. He let it sink beside her. Harper's face hardened. "We'll collect everything, Jackson. We've got CSI on the way." A forensic tech crouched to take photographs. The badge's tarnished edges, the mud-streaked lapel, the blood in the water's edge. I watched my life being documented, my failure, my tragedy, in high-resolution frames. By dawn, the farmhouse and field were sealed off. I stood outside the yellow tape, arms folded, eyes hollow. Rivera stayed by my side, silent. I wanted to blame her, wanted to scream that she was late, that I should have waited, that I should have done something differently. But the only words I found were a flat, "I'm sorry." She squeezed my shoulder. "You did your best." But I knew better. My best had led to her body drifting in cold water. Later, at the station, I sat behind my desk under harsh fluorescent lights. Coffee had gone cold in my hand. Harper's questions had given way to the paperwork. Reports, logs, witness statements. My own report stared back at me, typed in the dry language of law enforcement. Victim non-responsive upon recovery. Suspect remains at large. Evidence collected. I stared at the line. Suspect remains at large, as if it were the last thing in the world I'd ever type. I left the station at 0700 hours, pulling the patrol car onto the wet pavement. The sky was leaden, clouds low and motionless. I drove in silence, the windshield wipers slapping a slow rhythm. Back home, the lights were off. My wife had left an anonymous note beside the door. "We'll talk when you're ready." I pressed my forehead to the cool wood, then stepped inside and shut the door without looking back. Inside, everything was still. The coffee table with last week's mail, a pair of children's mittens by the coat rack, our daughters, now too small, photographs of us at Yellowstone, smiling beneath geysers and evergreens. I flicked on the kitchen light and leaned against the counter. I tasted the bitterness of coffee 2 days gone. I flipped through the photos, each one a fragment of a life that felt liquid now, slipping through my fingers like the water in that ditch. I wondered how families survived when someone they loved became water in the field. That night, I woke at 02:30. My phone was dead. I must have forgotten to charge it. I sat on the edge of the bed, flashlight in hand, staring out at the gold fingers of streetlight slicing through the curtains. I heard something. Footsteps? No, my own breath catching in my throat. I shook my head and clicked off the light, but the room stayed bright with phantom pressure. My pillow was damp. I breathed in and out, 2, 3, 4, until I convinced myself it was just a dream. But the next morning, I found a single muddy footprint on the front walkway, press boot-shaped, pointing toward the dark near the storm grate, and beside it, half buried in dirt, lay my badge, clean, gleaming, as if newly minted. I bent to pick it up. Cold metal bit into my palm. My heart thudded. I knew I'd locked it in the evidence locker. Knew I'd handed it over to Harper. This was impossible. I checked the timestamp on the dash cam footage from the night. Nothing but static when the suspect ran past the cruiser. No badge drop, no figure, no rescue. Only crickets and the static hiss. I rewound and fast-forwarded. The footage glitched. One frame burned bright, the shape of a hand stretched across the lens, and then a sickly green flash that scorched my eyes when I paused it. I returned home that evening and found the front door unlocked. No note this time, just the echo of distant laughter, childish, taunting, drifting down the hallway. I flicked on every light as I moved through the house, sweeping each room with my flashlight. Everything was exactly where it should be. Nothing was stolen, nothing was broken. Yet the footprint remained on the porch, as fresh as if made moments ago. I called Harper, but he didn't answer. I left a message. "Detective, we've got a problem. Badge on my porch, no one here." No call back. I tried Rivera's number, straight to voicemail. "Rivera, we need to talk." That night, I didn't sleep. At 01:45 a.m., I drove back out to US 95, to the edge of the cornfield, where the rain had washed away any footprints. I stood under the same pale moon, flashlight beam skimming empty rows. The broken window in the farmhouse sat calm, glass intact. I closed my eyes and listened, the low hum of traffic, the distant call of an owl, and faint, almost beneath the wind, the echo of my own radio crackle. Jackson to dispatch. My own voice distorted, begging for backup. I blinked. The sound vanished. I shivered and walked to the ditch. The water was still, silent. I knelt and pressed a finger to its surface. Ripples fanned outward, but the mud-stained badge from before was gone. But something else lay beneath the water, shining steel. I reached in and felt the cold metal of a gun barrel. I pulled it free, my service pistol, but warped, rusted, like something dredged up from a long-forgotten river tomb. The serial number, it matched mine. My breath caught. I stared at the reflection of the moon in the water, fractured, trembling. The rows of corn loomed behind me, black and silent. I felt eyes on me, an imperceptible shift in the air. I slid the pistol into my belt and stood, rain beginning to patter. In the corner of my vision, a figure stepped between the stalks, mask in hand. pale face half lit by moonlight, eyes too dark, too hollow. I aimed the pistol. He smiled, tilting his head. Then he raised his own gun, a service revolver, identical to mine, and fired. A deafening crack. I dove aside as a splinter of cornstalks erupted where the bullet struck the earth. My heart slammed. I holstered my weapon and advanced, each step a battle against dread. The figure receded into the field, gun raised, uttering a single word that echoed in my ears. "Remember," I called out. "No, you can't." But the wind swallowed my voice. He vanished. Only the endless corn remained. I sank to my knees again, thunder rolling in the distance, flash of lightning illuminating the dark corridors of a nightmare I could never wake from. And as I crawled back to the patrol car, soaked through, every sense screaming, I realized the intruder was never just a man. He was the darkness itself, haunting the roads, the houses, even the uniform you trust. He wore my face and carried my gun. He understood procedure because he was the procedure's shadow, the silent partner to every call we answer. I started the engine and drove away, headlights swallowed by the endless ribbon of highway. The radio crackled one last time, and between static and silence I heard a voice, intoned softly, almost tenderly. "Trooper Jackson, are you there?" Could I ever answer, or would the darkness speak for me instead?